need some music. Oh, you didn't see me accidentally switch to the wrong channel for a second. You didn't? Okay, I'm gonna turn the music back up. Welcome, everyone. Hello, Queen. Hello, Dead Goat Boy. And hello, Noelle. I'm starting Magical Girl Erasing Project Book 5. Pet the pet. Maybe this looks better. We ended up taking, like, different headmates would read through the books on our own time. We've been very slow at it. We're actually also on book 5 in our own time, but we're kind of close to the end of book 5. Okay, see ya, Noelle. I'm blinking out on what I was gonna say. You have headmates like to read more than others do? Yeah, I was gonna say, seems like just a few of us have read, but Meadow thought that it'd be more interesting if different headmates cover different arcs from now on. So yeah, I'm gonna read books 5 and 6, the limited arc. And I know Synth and Ghost like to read too. Yeah. I got creepy on my lap. Oh yeah, and I'm Felicity. I haven't streamed very much. I've just done I guested on the Crab Champion stream and watched Kaiba. I like to be referred to as nicknames. Like Fifi and City and Flick and Fluffy Fliss. Aww, kitty time. So yeah, I'm just gonna share there's some pictures in the beginning. This is like a promotional image, I guess it said. I don't think that's in the book. But I thought I'd share that since it was in with all the scanned images on the way. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I love the art in this. I wonder if they'll keep continuing the anime because they're working on an anime for the second arc, and this is the third arc. So this is like very similar picture to the cover, but it's like more washed out looking. Looks kind of digital with all the lines. That's Nanako-san, by the way. You spell her name 7753, but you pronounce it Nanako-san. And here's our first page of New Magical Girls. Oh yeah, I can Snow White, by the way, from the first arc, but I don't think she's in this one. But she does pop in time to time through the books. And there's Captain Grace can summon a really cool magic pirate ship. When you make a promise, she can make sure you keep it. Funny Trick. Funny Trick is the funniest character ever. Just her name and her ability. Can swap a hidden thing with another hidden thing. We've been pronouncing that Rain Pow. I don't know if it's supposed to be Rainbow. If we looked at the wiki, we'd probably find out. Should I do that really quick? I'm sorry. I forgot I could do that. Oh, it is pronounced Rainbow. Okay, I'm glad I looked it up. So we've been saying Rain Pow. Rainbow. Can materialize rainbow bridges. Hostari. Should I look up this one too? Because we don't know if it's postare or postery. One second. Oh, pose? Top. It looks like. Oh, wait, no. Postery. Postery? Poster. Yeah. It's postery. Okay. Can send any item back to its owner. Tepsekime can become one with the wind to go anywhere. And Kurukuruhime can control many ribbons. We kind of figured out who voices who. I'm trying to think. I think I was voicing Kurokurohime. Yeah. And obviously the narrator. On the second page, Mana uses spells and ceremonies to perform various magics. Hana Kyoko Kujo can make senses incredibly sharp. Nanako-san uses magic goggles that tell her all about her targets. Archfiend Palm uses her 4 large black wings to fight. And Ripple from the first arc can throw shuriken that always hit their target. Oh yeah, I forgot that that we do go over who voices who when we start these books. I'm so sorry, let me get that image back that I took down. And I can do that. So we have, this might change as we go on, but I think Q is Captain Grace, Cuddle is Funny Trick, Meadow is Wedden, Snuggle is Rainbow. I think Cuddle is also postery. Hollow is Tepsekime, and I'm Kurokurohime. Wait, I just deleted the wrong one, didn't I? Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me get that second one back. Image. It worked. Okay, so Magenta was Mana, Nili is Hana, Gecko Kujo. Rith is Nanako-san. Skitter is Ripple. And I guess that would be Meadow on Archfiend Palm. Okay, last page of introducing the characters. Pipey, Frederica can reflect whoever she wants in her crystal ball. That might also be Meadow. There's a lot of Meadow-esque characters in this one. Top Pop can materialize music notes with her magic guitar. That's Magma. Pukin can change the thoughts of anyone she stabs with her magic sword. Which might also be Meadow, unless we realize differently later. Sonia Bean can make whatever she touches crumble to bits. I think that was Chalky. Voice-wise, not kitten-wise. Okay. I'm finally starting reading. Woohoo! And I got a spooky. Prologue. Even a heart. Oh, the gadget! Even a heart toughened and rid of shame like a year of life as a teacher would still feel sad if wounded. That was true of anyone. Nozomi was no exception. It had happened that day at lunchtime. Some students had been enjoying themselves, hanging out and chatting on the stair landing. The door to the roof was locked, so the kids couldn't go there whenever they wanted, but nothing prevented them from going to the landing below the roof. It was larger than the others, but few students would gather at this location. Nobody would pass through aside from those who had business there, and they liked that particular quality about it. When Nozomi walked down the nearby hallway, heading to her next class, she heard boisterous laughter coming from that landing, even though lunch break was almost over. It seemed like a good idea to call out to them. Nozomi steeled herself and set her foot on the first step of the stairs to the roof. Also, I'm sorry if I forget who's saying what. Or if we forget who's saying what. Oh, right, we're about out of time. We're about out of time, huh? For real? Oh, you're right, lunchtime's almost over. It seemed there was no need for her to even say anything. She stepped down from the stair, and then, right when she was about to be on her way again... What class was next again? It's the monster, isn't it, I think? Oh, Japanese? We don't have to hand in the homework yet, right? You mean the book report? We just have to do that by the weekend. What a pain in the ass. Namiyama Middle School was a private school. Every single one of the students had made it through strict entrance examinations. No matter how much of a pain in the ass they found it to be, it was unusual to find any brave souls who would skip class. Nozomi let the two students rush by down the stairs, cackling as they went. Looking at their backs as they headed toward their classroom, she noticed their hairstyles looked familiar, and their voices sounded familiar too. Both students were from Class 2B. As Nozomi surreptitiously watched them go, she saw them arrive at the classroom she herself was about to enter. So she wasn't mistaken after all. She turned the fact over in her mind, digesting the implications, and as she listened to the bell that signaled the end of break, Nozomi's heart was broken. Teachers got nicknames. This was not at all unusual. That had happened back when Nozomi had been a student too. On the kinder side, there was Mrs. Kobayashi, called Mrs. K, and Mr. Watanabe, referred to simply as Nabe. Plenty of teachers had been awarded horrible nicknames from boys and girls who were as cruel as you'd expect them to be at that age. But teachers like that would get their cruel epithets for a reason. These bad teachers were unpleasant, the sort who constantly reprimanded students for unfair reasons, or creeps who ogled the girls. Some were actually quite excellent, and just very strict, even knowing they were hated. But that didn't change the animosity their students had for them. That pair's conversation clung tenaciously to her thoughts. What class was next again? It's the monster, isn't it? I think. Oh, Japanese? Even if it was your least favorite subject, you wouldn't call a Japanese class a monster. Those two were clearly referring to Nozomi, the Japanese teacher, personally. From the way the other kid had questioned the nickname, she could also deduce that the nickname monster was entrenched. A bad teacher is a really horrible thing. Makes you not want to go to school at all. Yeah. Hi, Fuki. Welcome. Monster. From her time as a student to her year as a teacher, she'd never had such a cruel nickname. The simple sharpness of it cut deep. A keen, woo! Oh my gosh! Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Leonis Familia, for the raid. Wow. Aww. And thank you for the follow. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, have a good day. Hope your stream went good. Welcome. Oh my gosh. Oh, it's 5 a.m. Hi, colorful cast. Welcome, I'm just reading a Magical Girl Racing Project. I'm starting the third arc, which is the fifth book. Yeah. um, Nozomi wasn't the type to scold students harshly. She tried to be gentle in her reprimanding, and she could swear she was very careful about the way she taught her class, too. She didn't get her kicks trapping students with malicious trick questions. Some might call her useless as a teacher because she was too compromising with students, but she was fine with that. She knew just how much harder her job would get if her students hated her. And yet she was hated, perhaps detested even. The nickname Monster was that damaging. It meant they didn't even regard her as a fellow human being. They were treating her as some completely alien creature. This was beyond the fence that stood between student and teacher. It was the thick wall that divided humans from other things. It was doubtful anyone could break through that. Though her heart ached after this intense shock, Nozomi did her job. A teacher couldn't abandon her post just because her students hurt her feelings. Not even a full-time adjunct who had yet to be officially appointed. Besides, Nozomi's ordeals weren't over yet. Further unpleasantness was still ahead. She had another job after school, overseeing a meeting of the Cultural Festival Cleanup Committee. All she had to do was be there and give advice if needed. But this time around, one of the committee members was the biggest troublemaker in the school. Nozomi was just praying the girl when it caused her any problems. She heaved a deep, deep sigh. Their grade's head teacher, who sat 3 seats away from her, expressed some concern. "Are you all right?" "Yes, I'm fine," Nozomi responded with a smile that was surely not very convincing. She doubted she looked fine. The other teacher glanced back at Nozomi with worry. After school, Nozomi dragged herself to the science room. Sliding open the door, she found it completely empty. Inside were the long white table and 3 chairs that were kept in there. Since the school didn't have a science club, there were no students around. For some reason or another, her steps grew more cautious. As she was a Japanese teacher, the science room was out of her territory, and on top of that, she never even entered the science prep room ahead. Wasn't it normally locked anyway? Dangerous chemicals and experimental apparatuses were stored in there, so students couldn't enter without permission. No science. The same was somewhat true for Nozomi. Even though she was a teacher, she was basically an intruder here. Why were they meeting in the science prep room? Meow. The student council should have made the decision, but it hadn't taken much responsibility in handling the matter. Meow. The president had laughed, saying, "It just kind of ended up that way, you know. So then who made the decision if not you?" Oh, wait. Sorry. So then who made the decision if not you? The door to the prep room was at the back of the science room. The small entrance was hidden in the shadow of the cleaning supplies locker. Unlike the other classrooms, this door was in a sliding one. You had to turn a knob for entry. Since the prep room had been added to the building only 20 years ago, it looked more modern than the other, older rooms, or so she'd heard from the principal. Nozomi put her hand on the knob and twisted. It moved. It wasn't locked. There were already people inside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in total. They were all staring at Nozomi. The one poking at the anatomical model was Umi Shibahara from Class 2B. Hang on, I want to pick up Gravy. Gravy. She was incredibly athletically talented and had set prefectural records for the 100-meter dash and the triple jump or something. Perhaps she had just Perhaps she had too much energy, as her antics featured heavily in the rumors around here. She was one of the most famous people in the school. Umi Shibahara turned around suddenly, and her ponytail whacked someone on the nose. Kayo Nomura, also in Class 2C. She was often seen hanging out with Shibahara. Peeking into the tortoise aquarium was Mine Musabiya, the representative for Class 2D, an excellent student, favored by teachers and popular with the other kids too. She was neither a jerk nor an unwilling appointee. She was the proper sort of class rep. The two sitting in chairs in the corner were both first years. The one in the glasses was Tatsuko Sakaki. The one with long hair was Kaori Ninotsugi. Their timidity wasn't unexpected, given they were among older students. But even then, they seemed particularly shy, from the way they tied their hair to the strictly dress code adherent length of their skirts. Nozomi didn't teach first years, so all she knew of them was their names. Eyes jerking to her wristwatch, Nozomi checked the time. It was 5 minutes until the meeting was to begin, so she wasn't late. The cultural festival cleanup committee was in charge of dealing who would do what when it came to tidying up. Compared to the presentation and staff refreshment booths, the stars of the show, this job had a reputation for being boring and unpopular. What's more, the role would sometimes draw uncalled for resentment from other students. Even if you assigned tasks as equally as possible, some kids would always complain. Gravy shows his face in the book. How come we're the only ones slaving away here? Meow. That was the other reason nobody ever chose to be on the cleaning committee. Ask for volunteers all you wanted, but nobody would raise their hands. Still, you couldn't run a festival without one, so Nozomi was told that the student council would randomly select students to be the sacrificial lambs. She was shocked then that all of these kids had gathered 5 minutes early. Maybe even sacrificial lambs could be motivated in their own way. Yeah. He's so silly. Chapter 1, Establishing the Magical Girl Squad. History. Tatsuko Sakaki had been timid and introverted ever since she was young. When she was chosen to be on the cultural festival cleanup committee, where she'd be forced to work together with kids she'd never spoken to before, she'd wondered how she would manage. But her friend and classmate Kaori was chosen too, which was a huge relief. Tatsuko was glad to have someone who would join her in whining, "Aw man, and this sucks," when she thought about having to make her way to the science prep room alone and trembling. I'm gonna set it down. He's getting squirmy. The presence of a companion put her heart at ease. Heading to the meeting, they passed by the table tennis club alternates doing push-ups in the hallway and ignored the sound of the concert band practicing. Putting her hand on the doorknob of the science prep room, Tatsuko found it wasn't locked. This was the cleaning committee's first meeting, and Tatsuko had left early to ensure she wouldn't make the other students wait. It would have been best if she could have come before the teacher even unlocked the room, but it seemed there was already people here. The room was dyed in the crimson light of the sunset, and inside was a girl sitting on a chair. "You're both on the cleaning committee too, huh?" she asked. "You too, huh?" Kaoru responded. Tatsuko left the conversation to her, practically hiding behind Kaori as she listened to them talk. A few minutes later, the prep room door opened noisily. 2 more older students joined the group. One of them was famous enough that even Tatsuko knew who she was. Umi Shibahara. Her hair, tied into a ponytail, was dyed a shade lighter than what was allowed by the school, and there was something sloppy about the way she wore her uniform. She was well known thanks to the dubious tales of her exploits. They said they couldn't measure her grip strength because she'd crushed the dynamometer in her fist, and that she'd once marched into some Yakuza office to beat them all down solo. The veracity of these stories aside, she was not the type you wanted to get involved with. Tatsuko had assumed all the students had been picked for this against their will, but it seemed this was not the case for Umi. It was just kind of like, sort of like I could smell an adventure. She was extremely excited, but what did she mean she could smell an adventure? The normal assumption would be that this was a joke. But if Umi was in fact serious and Tatsuko laughed, she could see it ending very badly. So she just let the remark slide with an ambiguous expression that could be taken either way. Tatsuko preferred talking to older students over her own peers. If she acted timid talking with a classmate, they would look down on her for it. But if she were talking with an upperclassman, sometimes they'd interpret that as deference. The problem here was that one of these older girls was famous in school for her wild character, and Tatsuko didn't know what sort of attitude might light her fuse. Maintaining this vague, non-committal demeanor was really hard on her nerves. The crimson hue of the sunset faded, and already a dark reddish brown was beginning to illuminate the older girls' faces. It was winter now. The sun would set soon. Checking Umi's expression, Tatsuko saw she was glancing around the area restlessly, as if she was expecting something. She wasn't about to go on a rampage, was she? If she was the sort of person the rumor said, then it was bound to happen. Tatsuko continued to wait with an upset stomach from the building anxiety, and that was when the door to the prep room opened. It was the teacher. Tatsuko knew her too, Miss Nozomi Himeno. She didn't teach first-year classes, but she was still hard to ignore. She was the same size as the students, particularly the first years. Despite probably being in her late 20s, she looked unusually young, childlike in fact. If she were to wear a uniform, she'd probably have no trouble blending in with the students. Her age-defying appearance had earned her the nickname Monster, something even an outsider like Tatsuko knew. Sorry. Have you already started? The teacher asked. No, not yet. Then let's begin. It's a little early, but that just means we'll finish quick. Miss Himeno sat down in a chair, prompting one of the older girls to stand up. It was the girl who had entered the room first. A single thick braid fell down her back, and her red plastic-framed glasses reflected the setting sun. She looked like a class rep. I'm Musubiya from Class 2D, and I'll preside over this meeting for now. Thank you very much for gathering here today for this Cultural Festival Cleanup Committee meeting. Now then, before we decide how roles will be allocated, let's introduce...
So you're all finally here.
Yeah, I'm listening to, Video Game Study Lounge, 24/7 stream. Yeah. I love listening to, lo-fi video game music. YouTube stations. Oh, I'm good, I'm glad. Came a voice with no place, in particular, in interrupting the meeting. It sounded high-pitched and youthful, like a child's. One you generally never hear in a middle school. Tatsuko and the other girls glanced around the room, but there were no little kids anywhere.
You all have the strongest magical potential of anyone in this school. I want you to use your talents to save me. Of course, I'll thank you for it by making you all into magical girls.
Oh yeah, this is Snuggle voicing this character, by the way. A small round of ball light fell from the roof. For an instant, Tatsuko tensed. Thinking the light bulb was falling, the luminous orb slowly floated down and away from the ceiling, dimming as it descended. When it settled on the table, it had become a dull, pale white light. Within was a doll about a half a foot tall.
Nice to meet you. My name is Toko. As you can see, I'm a fairy.
Everyone held their tongues, eyes locked on the creature. It wasn't a doll. It was moving. Words were coming from its mouth. Its musculature and movements were not artificial. Its expression was full of life, too. But it was still clearly not human. It was wreathed in light, with translucent insect-like wings growing from its back, and there was no way any human could be just half a foot tall.
As you can all see, you all have the capacity. I can nurture that talent and make you into full-fledged magical girls. Please accept this offer and save me. I'm being chased by evil mages.
Suddenly aware she had been holding her breath the entire time, Tatsuko blew out a phew. She was trying to make sense of what was happening and what she was hearing, but to no avail. She could tell she was confused. Looking to the side to see what Kaori thought of all this, she squeaked. She found a strange woman sitting there. She was wearing a frighteningly garish and strange outfit. It was the kind of blinding gaudy garment seen only in high fashion, the circus, cosplay events, anime, manga, or video games. The two ponytails hanging from either side of her head were a beautiful ombre. Ombre? Her gloves sparkled in 7 different colors, and her flamboyant clothing exposed quite a lot of skin, too. She was crowned with a prismatic halo that floated above her head, and another larger halo covered across her back. There were more around her ankles, too. As accessories, they completely defied reality. Whether she was hanging them with thread or supporting them with wire, they were somehow all in midair. Tatsuko yelped, and the fancy-looking lady's shoulders twitched as she looked at Tatsuko. Her face was beautiful and so surreal it carried just as much impact as her clothing. Quickly, confusion spread across her perfect face.
Zuko?
Tatsuko panicked and realized the girl's sleeve, startled by the fact she'd been holding onto it in the first place. Her fingers should have been squeezing Kaori's sleeve as she hid behind her. For whatever reason, at some point, she had ended up clutching the sleeve of this unfamiliar girl through methods unknown.
Are you Zuko?
The girl seemed confused, and Tatsuko was confused by her question too. How would this stranger even know Tatsuko's nickname? And where had Kaori gone? She gazed at her surroundings. A pirate and a strange magician were pointing at each other and shouting. Both of them were no less beautiful than the girl who sat beside Tatsuko. A ballerina bedecked in ribbons was trembling. Her face was white as a sheet, and for some reason there was also a bride in a wedding dress, and an Arabian-style dancing girl was floating in the air and watching them from near the ceiling. Suddenly, Tatsuko looked at her own hands and arms. Her fingers were long. These weren't her hands. The outfit she was wearing was not her school uniform either. She looked at her reflection in the window glass, and staring back at her was a cute version of a postal delivery person she'd once seen in some classic film. Just like the others, her features were perfectly flawless. When she gently patted her face, the delivery girl in the window touched her own face too.
Do you get it now? You're magical girls, with all the talents that come with the title. You're the only ones who can drive away the evil mages who are approaching this town.
New picture. Tatsuko listened intently to everything the fairy said, but none of it stuck. There's Tepsekime in the top left, and then Funny Trick and Captain Grace, and then Rainbow and Postery. Captain Grace. There were a lot of people who judged Umi Shibahara to be a lawless troublemaker. However, the phrase did not describe her accurately. She could be violent, and she would often ignore the rules, but those were just the consequences of her nature. At her core, Umi Shibahara was an adventurer, and all she did was follow the desires oozing out of her. She wanted excitement. She wanted thrills. She wanted to see what she had never seen before. She wanted to do what she'd never done before. There had to be amazing things out there in the world that Umi didn't know about yet. She wished she could be a character in a story. She didn't care if the goal was to find treasure or to beat up bad guys. As long as there was great adventure to be had, that was enough for her. Whether by good luck or bad, Umi's hometown was surrounded by nothing but mountains. When she was very small, she would literally go around the mountains and fields until she'd gotten herself lost one time in kindergarten and was no longer allowed outside. Yeah, if only an adventure would happen. If only. It was around that time when she'd learned various escape techniques, like pulling up tatami to remove the floorboards, pushing up ceiling boards, or hopping out the second floor window to the branch of a tree that grew in the garden. Thereafter, she had cultivated a series of virtues, the strength of spirit to never be discouraged, even when scolded by her parents, the creative ingenuity needed to make escapes, the survival skills she had learned in the wilderness, the physical ability to contend with beasts, and so on and so forth. It all led up to this point. Yes, to this very moment in middle school, together with Kaio Nomura, her childhood friend and constant companion, Umi had continuously sought adventure, while everyone else had descended into chaos. Umi was different. She'd always dreamed of adventure and her strength experience. And most of all, her passion had been... Sorry, I said her strength experience. There was a comma there. And her strength experience, and most of all, her passion, had been building all this time. So this was the very situation she'd always been waiting for. When you're ready for anything, you approach things with a different mindset than those who lack any preparation for such a strange situation. What's more, she'd had a premonition. She felt almost certain that something was sure to happen before the end of the cleaning committee meeting that day. What's going on? What the heck is this? A fairy? Is this a prank? Where's the hidden camera? With a sidelong glance toward the others, in their panicked commotion, Umi worked to get a handle on the situation. She tried lightly waving a hand. She clenched a fist. She drew in a breath, then exhaled again. She did a little jump. She changed right down to the very structure of her body. She was strong and full of energy. She even felt as if she could knock out a whale in one punch. Despite her excitement, her mind was calm, silently ablaze. She checked her reflection in the window glass. A sword was hanging from her waist. She pushed the hilt up with her thumb to draw out 2 knuckles worth of blade out from the sheath. The single-edged curved sword shone dully. It was the weapon of a pirate. Just lightly touching her thumb to it drew blood. It was sharp. It was real. The fairy had said that they'd become magical girls. Umi seemed to be dressed up as a girly version of Captain Hook from Peter Pan, but the term magical girl made more sense for the other faces present. All right, Umi pumped a fist. Everyone else seemed to be panicked and confused as they stared at her, but she wasn't bothered. You said magical girls, right?
Yep, you guys all have magical talent. You're the ones who'll be able to beat the evil mages.
The fairy told them that her enemies had chased her out of the magical kingdom all the way here. The evil mages would mess up the human world if the girls did nothing, so they had to drive these people away somehow. The fairy spoke to them at length about this, but Umi casually ignored it. So we just have to fight these evil mages and win, right? Umi just meant to confirm what it was they were supposed to do, but it seemed the fairy interpreted her inquiry as questioning the point of engaging at all.
If you fight them for me, then you'll you'll be able to transform into magical girls anytime you like. That's my thanks.
The fairy listed the merits of cooperating, then began to explain what her prize to them all would entail.
Magical girls are way stronger and faster than normal humans, and each one has their own magical power.
There was a blink in space and a scatter of some unknown substance. Umi felt weight in her hands, and when she looked down, she was holding a heart-shaped device. Something was displayed on its screen.
That's a magical phone that only magical girls can use. Your names and personal information are all written in there.
You're pretty prepared for this. Already, something that looked like Umi's personal data was displayed on the device the fairy had given her. On the screen, there was a cute, cartoonish pirate captain, and beside it, some text. Captain Grace, that must be her name, uses a magic ship that can go really fast over water. Probably her magic.
Hey, Kaio,
said Umi. What kind of magic do you have? From the side, she peeked at the magical phone belonging to the stage magician named Magical Girl. Her name was Bunny Trick, and her ability was to switch any two hidden items. Are you Umi? Kaio asked. You can't tell? No, I can't. I have no idea what's going on here. Do you, Umi? I get the gist of it. The gist isn't good enough. How can you just accept all this? I told you, didn't I? I've had a feeling about this since morning. By the way, your fishnets are pretty sexy. That's got nothing to do with this right now. The fairy cut off Umi and Kaio's conversation, flying in the air to land on the desk on her knees.
Please, save me, and not just me. Save the world.
She was yelling. Perhaps she'd, had all she could take, because she was starting to act hysterical. Super Mario 64 credit music remix. Is it really? Nice. Sure, I'll do it. Of course Umi would. Oh, that's so sweet. I'm glad to hear. Huddle is eventually gonna play that game. Yeah, exactly. You always gotta compliment your friend's sexy fishnets. The adventure she'd been waiting for had arrived. The fairy's face was bursting with glee.
Really? Thank you.
Umi! Shut up, Kaio. Don't tell me to shut up. Umi couldn't deal with Kaio anymore. She smiled at the fairy. Anyway, me and Kaio will help you out. Why am I on this too? Another girl interrupted Kaio's wailing. Hold on a moment, Shibahara. That is who you are, right? Yeah, it's Shibahara. Wait, are you Miss Himeno? The ribbon-strewn ballerina waved her hands violently in a show of indignation. She still looked about as young now as she had pre-transformation. Kaio bowed her head, saying, Go on, Miss Himeno. Please talk some sense into her. That's no way to speak to your teacher. I don't really understand all of this, but a fight with evil mages is serious business. Let's leave all that to the police. It's not something middle school students should be doing, at least. Even the teachers accepted this for some reason, Kaio muttered, clutching her head. What was she so unhappy about? The fairy raised her head and countered the ribbon girl's remarks.
We have no time. Our enemies are already close, and the police won't be able to beat them. Only magical girls can.
I can't let students engage in such a dangerous task.
And I'm telling you, if you don't stop them now, the peril will be even greater.
Come on, let's do it. It'll be totally fun. Shibahara. Personally, I feel like anyone who wouldn't try to save such a cute little fairy has got some problems as a human being. She's asking for her help, so we might as well. That's what girl power is all about, right? Umi tugged on the sleeve of the girl in the wedding dress and stared into the eyes of the girl in the rainbow costume. we don't do this now, we'll be totally missing out. Even if all you guys aren't gonna do it, me and Kaya will manage ourselves. But you might as well join us, right? Come on, let's do this, let's do this! I just know we'll have a good time. I wouldn't mind joining in. The wedding dress girl stood up. She even had a carefully lit candle and bouquet. Bouquet, right? Bouquet, yeah. I thought this might be a prank, but this fairy is clearly alive, isn't she? Apparently, what she said about incredible powers is no lie. She plucked a 10-yen coin, probably used in some experiment, from where it had been left in the metal dish at the front of the shelf. Using only her index and middle fingers, she squeezed it to show everyone that she could bend it. I was starting to get bored of studying for entrance exams. Powers like these would open up some new avenues to us, wouldn't they? I've determined that this is worth the risk.
Me too!
The girl carrying the rainbow on her back raised her right hand.
I'll do it too. I've always wanted something like this. You'll do it too, right, Zuko?
The postal delivery style girl next to her glanced around nervously and then hesitantly nodded. May'll do it too. Hearing a voice... Oh wait, sorry, wrong character.
May'll do it too.
Hearing a voice from above, Umi looked up at the ceiling. There was a girl floating cross-legged in midair, dressed in a very revealing outfit, like the dancing girls from Arabian Nights. May wants to be a magical girl.
Nice,
said the fairy.
I like those answers. So let's get pumped up and beat those evil mages.
Like I said, how can you guys just accept this situation? Kaio yelled. Why are you all responding so quickly? Take another moment to consider just how dangerous this is. The girl in the ribbons whacked the table and her curls bounced like coiled springs. The fairy was flung off the table and caught by the rainbow girl. Unfortunately, one of the table legs had broken around the middle, causing it to tilt to one side.
If you absolutely insist on backing out.
Still in the rainbow girl's hands, the fairy turned back to face the ribbon girl. Oh wait, that was the wrong.
If you absolutely insist on backing out, then I'll just erase your memories and make you forget about this transformation. I can't have any of you telling people about this. I've got to keep everything about magic a secret. You can't just... You're a teacher at this school, aren't you? I understand a teacher's desire to protect her students. I don't know much about the human world, but that's what teachers do, right?
The fairy's expression appeared somehow more mature. Perhaps it was the illumination of the sunset.
Then you fight together with them. Either your memories will be erased and you'll go back to your normal lifestyle on your own, or you'll fight the evil mages together with your students. They're almost here. It's not just me in trouble, it's the whole world. Please save me.
Okay, I think I'm gonna go on a little be right back. I need to refill my water. Yeah, there it is. Hello. I'm back. It is funny they're playing this song. Thank you. Let's see. Tepseki May had an incredibly limited amount of memories and experiences. Even if she learned something new, it would be quickly overwritten, leaving behind nothing worthwhile. And even the memories that did remain to her weren't all that clear either. She would immediately forget anything that wasn't useful to her day-to-day life because she didn't need it. Oh, thank you. When she was zoning out, that was literally all she was doing. Someone else might look at her and believe she was deep in thoughts, but May didn't think or consider things, since she knew it was simply a waste to do so. Having taken this lack of mental activity for granted, becoming a magical girl was an excess of freedom for May. Everything about the world was dazzling and bright. She could interpret other people's intentions and use the same methods to communicate her own will. Her limbs moved freely and lightly. She could jump, leap, spin her arms around, fold her legs, do anything. Best of all, she could fly. If she thought, I want to go here, I want to go there, then she was free to do so. No one could stop her. Meow.
Meow.
Gravy's back. While the others were having some conversation she couldn't really follow, May continued to investigate her new abilities.
Meow.
She could move quickly, she was strong, and she could fly. She put her hand to her stomach. There was no chronic hunger, no sense of starvation that never went away no matter how much she was fed. Meow. She didn't feel like she had to expel any waste. All sexual desire had disappeared too. I see, she thought. If she'd gained many things, she'd lost many too. That must mean she'd not received this body for free, but rather had acquired it in exchange for something else now gone. After this consideration, she found herself shocked that she was capable of forming such thoughts. She could add and subtract. Funny about this was fun in general. Even in this one room, there were lots of interesting-looking objects. As she fiddled with this, touched that, biting, whacking, rolling, and generally messing around, the conversation continued. May said she'd wanted to stay a magical girl and found out that the others did too. It seemed that magical girls were special. Though she didn't quite know what to do with the ensuing pride, she decided she would stick with these people. According to the tiny human with wings, they had to be these evil mage people or else they couldn't keep their powers. May thought that would be very boring. Before she had become a magical girl, her world had always been peaceful and her life easy. But now that she knew about this world, she didn't want to go back. Going outside, she learned even more. Magical girls had abilities called magic. Gravy. May could become one with the air. By melting into the atmosphere, she could fly through it, and it seemed she could do much more with it too. She zoned out, listening to the human with wings giving them all instructions, and then noticed that the rainbow human was watching May. The rainbow human spoke to her.
Are you bored? Why? Oh, you just looked like you were.
May wasn't, of course, but she'd never experienced anything so fun and interesting in her whole life. But the rainbow human had said she looked bored. All the other magical girls were changing the shapes of their faces. Thank you, KP Slider. While they spoke out loud to communicate, they did not look at... Why does this word looks like anuses? They did not look at something or bump heads. What is that word? May wasn't trying to change the shape of her face. Maybe that had suggested she was bored. Having hypothesized this much, May tried changing her own face shape at the rainbow human. She figured that alone wouldn't be enough, so she tried making a sound. That should give the sense she was properly enjoying herself. But the rainbow human bobbed her head back and forth and said,
I'm sorry.
then backed away. That didn't seem like an acknowledgement that May was having fun. The other magical girls were also staring at May. She realized she failed to get the reaction she wanted. If I have another chance, I'll do a little better next time, May thought. Being a magical girl is really hard, but at the same time, interesting. Captain Grace. Yeah, exactly. Teachers, like parents, were an annoying obstacle. They always tried to get in the way of her exploits. This totally unreal, fantastical event was happening right in front of them. Umi was completely baffled that Miss Himeno could say something so completely lacking in adventurous spirit. A flying fairy came to bestow you with magical power wasn't something people got to experience more than once in a lifetime. In fact, for most, it wouldn't happen at all. Even if she was their teacher, ordering them to kick the stroke of luck away was beyond arrogant. Umi absolutely could not accept that. Adventure was waiting right over there. It was only polite to run for it until their lungs gave out. Fortunately, the fairy, Toko, was better with words than she looked. By offering the teacher the choice between losing her memories and returning to normalcy and fighting together with her students as a magical girl, she had convinced her. Now nothing would get in the way of Umi's adventure. Though grudgingly, Miss Himeno accepted, and all of them followed Toko's instructions, preparing for their counterattack by heading out to where they would intercept their opponents. Toko chose an intersection about 100 yards from the school, heading in the direction of the mountains. No shops or institutions were visible from that point, except the school. Aside from a few sparse houses, the most this area had was a parking lot. Though the road was wide enough, it was in particularly poor condition, with cracks large and small running through the asphalt. It was afternoon, but there were a few pedestrians or cars passing through. Still, the number was more than 0.
This is where you'll fight back against the evil mages.
But if we fight here, won't people see us? Said Umi. Isn't magic generally supposed to be a secret?
It is, but this is an emergency situation. When things are this bad, you fiddle with the witnesses' memories after. You'll be fine as long as you can withdraw before the police and firefighters come.
According to Toko, the evil mages might be able to detect the presence of magical girls. That was why Umi and the others had to de-transform and go hide. Each of them was directed to a hiding spot, where they returned to human form and waited patiently. After learning about their wonderful powers, going back to being human to wait for the fight made Umi rather uneasy. Looking over, she saw that funny trick. Kayo Nomura seemed anxious too, as she looked up at the traffic light. She'd also been restless the whole way there, peeking into the garbage bin next to the vending machine, jumping at the littlest noises, tensing every time a car passed. She was acting extremely suspicious. Umi grabbed Kayo firmly by the head and yanked it up. Listen, there's no point in hiding if you're going to be poking your head out of the bushes. Sorry. I get that you're worried, but right now we've got to believe in Toko. Umi looked at the smartphone in her hand. The signal hadn't come yet. Toko had disappeared from her perch on top of the traffic light. She was just invisible, though, and she was still there, with a magical phone line beside her. When the enemy came, she would give the order to everyone. That was the plan. Umi and Kayo were hiding in the lilac thicket beneath the traffic light. The class rep and the teacher were using a car in the parking lot as cover. while the two first years were hiding in the shadow of a cement block wall around a house for sale. The Arabian dancer girl was apparently taking cover in a ditch. Umi was impressed she could bring herself to hide in a place like that. She could have sworn the setting sun had been visible earlier, but now it was covered by thick, gloomy, murky black clouds. It was November. The story is taking place right now. Now that they changed back to human form, she felt cold, as if she'd freeze from staying still. She tucked the collar of her jacket in and hugged her arms to herself. Directly inhaling the cold wind made the inside of her nose sting. She scowled at herself for being bothered by something so trivial as the temperature. Something this minor was getting to her. She needed better powers of concentration. This was her first real fight as a new magical girl. What was that what was making her nervous? She reached out to the sword hanging from her hip, but her hand swiped through air. She recalled that she wasn't transformed right now and scowled again. What's wrong? Nothing. If you got time to be worried about me, then worry about yourself. Kaio seemed uneasy. She always did when she was with Umi, but usually Umi would smile and say, I'm providing you with some entertainment, so it's cool. That would be it. But when Umi herself looked uneasy, those weak justifications didn't hold up. Gravy's just been standing on my lap. What you doing, buddy? I'm gonna lay down? I'm gonna lay down? There you go. Yeah. Oh, now she got it. Umi hadn't felt this in so long, she'd forgotten what it was. It wasn't fear, but a premonition. Something was approaching, something that would threaten her life, even now that she had Captain Grace's power. Her intuition had acted up like this multiple times before, and these were the instincts animals followed to avoid danger. But Umi recognized the danger and braved it. Acknowledging its presence was enough. I know this song. Let's get ready for this adventure. Umi began her routine for coping with peril. Taking long but shallow breaths, she relaxed the senses in the back of her mind. This was something other people never got, even if she tried to explain it to them. She tensed her nerves, and the little things ceased to matter. She exhaled out all the air inside her body. When her lungs were empty, she forced out one more breath. Even though she was lying low in a thicket with cold wind blowing through it, her body grew warmer. Quietly, the excitement built inside her. She wasn't irritated anymore, even looking at uneasy Kaio.
They're coming.
Toko's voice came from Umi's smartphone. They'd been connected in a call this whole time. The timbre of her voice was the same, just significantly quieter. The two words carried a tingling anxiety. They couldn't transform yet. Umi glanced along the road from the thicket to see a white station wagon rolling down the road. No other people or cars. She checked the sign by the road, and it said, the speed limit was 30 miles per hour. The station wagon was driving about 5 miles below that. It slowed down even further, and then pulled onto the shoulder about 20 yards from the light and stopped. Gonna go to bed now? The rest of the stream is full of chill vibes, and only a reasonable amount of murder. Thank you, Cece. Have a good sleepy. Her stomach was gurgling. Sweat from her neck was dripping down into her armpits. The lilac thicket swayed into the wind, and the tall weeds fluttered. Kaio gulped. Umi's senses captured every little detail. Her concentration was fully engaged. Once she had processed everything, she focused on the station wagon. Smiling with just her lips, she thought, not bad. The door of the station wagon opened and someone stepped out from inside. They were wearing a coat with a hood that hid their face and expression. Under this cold sky, they were wearing a well-known brand of sneakers with no socks. Toko. It was the voice of a young woman, but it had a threatening edge. She addressed the hidden fairy as if she were plainly visible. Toko replied in a casual, teasing tone.
You look younger than I thought. You took
It's funny how a sentence changes a lot if you just replace two consonants.
You took longer than I thought.
Do you want this to hurt, or will you come quietly? Take your pick. She seems to be a bad guy, all right.
I don't really like either option.
Toko revealed herself. That was the signal. Umi, now the magical girl, Captain Grace, drew her sword as she leaped out. Behind her, she could hear Kaio tearing up the concrete road as she ran. The teacher, class rep, and the two first years all sprang out of hiding in the same instant, too. Everyone had transformed. The Arabian dancing girl snaked up to the sky before descending to follow the station wagon.
Gravy, 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 gravy.
Funny trick. She thought they were all nuts. She'd been hanging around Umi Shibahara for a long time, so she wasn't as bad. Her crazy antics were nothing new, but meaning Musabiya had an intellectual image, as befitting her title of class representative. The two first-year girls, wearing their school uniforms strictly according to regulation standard, had struck her as diligent students. Miss Himeno had a baby face, but she had lived about twice as long as Kaio and the rest, so she should possess commensurate life experience. These people had not seemed open to an avant-garde lifestyle like Umi, or so Kaio had thought. It was like a bad dream. She'd been dragged into this cosplay magical girl army, attacking these evil mages with no permission to resist. Not even knowing who their enemy was, they were all converging on the vague idea of evil in the station wagon. It was licking the pages.
What are you doing? You're so silly.
This was no different from robbery or terrorism. The woman in the coat yelled something into the car as she prepared to meet Umi's attack. Kaia was a little surprised by how fast she reacted. She didn't just have the speed of a magical girl, it looked like she'd sensed their attack. Umi, who dashed out in front faster than any of the others, swung her sword in a sideways arc, and her opponent evaded it with ease. Though she breathed a sigh of relief, Kaia was shocked. The sigh was because she was thankful their enemy had avoided Umi's decisive, potentially fatal swing, and the shock was because the enemy was quick enough to avoid the magical girl attack. Why are there so many? The woman yelled. At the same time, her coat ripped. Oh. Speaking of rip, yeah. Greedy yanked my headphones. Where'd it go? Her coat ripped and her sneakers flew off. Underneath her coat was a kimono, but the hem ended 4 inches above the knee, boldly exposing her thighs. There was no mistaking that she was connected to all this. Her face was flawless, and she had bunny ears on top of her head. Oh, we did the wrong voice then. It's hard to know who's talking sometimes. Then the driver poked their head out from inside the car, too. This one was dressed in a black coat, sunglasses, and a black fedora. Like some sort of mafia lackey. We didn't expect this many. Retreat for now. The mobster pulled some kind of black stick, thrust it out the window, and aimed its tip at them. Flaming, thumb-sized projectile shot out of it with a bang, bang, bang. Despite the mafia motif, the person was actually a mage. Kaio, now the magical girl funny trick, knocked down the stone-like projectiles flying toward her with her wand, even as she felt like bursting into tears. The machine gun fire of flaming stones had the element of surprise. Kaio was, in fact, very startled, but the weapon's speed was no match for the reflexes of magical girls. Swords and ribbons battled the fire bullets away, and they quickly vanished. As the girls defended themselves, the mobster mage kept on shooting as they drove, spinning around to do a U-turn. As the car sped off, a casting net shot off of it with a pop. It was large but slower than the fire projectiles. And since it couldn't kill them, the girls took fewer pains in dodging it. But the net did catch one girl, the one dressed like a European-esque delivery person. She was tangled up in the net, struggling. Saying it aloud would be mean, but that one was sort of slow. Kaio recalled. That girl was one of the two first years. With the net toss at its parting shot, the car attempted to speed away. The rainbow girl chased after it, and the bunny-eared girl stayed behind to fight. The Arabian dancer girl was delivering alternating blows from up in the sky. But Bunny Ears avoided them as she restrained the girl in the wedding dress and fended off the blade of the pirate captain, Umi, even though it was moving so fast Kaio could hardly see it. Kaio looked down at her feet. The postal delivery girl was struggling inside the net. She couldn't tear it, but it wouldn't come off either, and the more she thrashed, the more it seemed to entangle her. The poor thing, Kaio thought. She clearly wasn't good at fighting, and yet she'd been brought out here anyway. Thinking back to when the fairy had first shown up, she remembered one girl had seemed less enthusiastic about the whole thing. She'd been dragged along by her friend, hadn't she? Just like Kaio. Kaio addressed the girl at her feet. Don't move. Curl up as small as you can. She smiled as kindly as she could as the girl peered up at her in terror. Kaio was surprised at herself for keeping it together enough to show compassion to someone else and scoffed at herself. Maybe I'm just pitying a kindred spirit. The postal delivery girl did what Kaio said. Inside the net, she held her knees and balled up, and Kaio flung her cape over the girl, completely covering her body. Kaio, the magical girl funny trick, could use her magic to swap the positions of any two hidden things. What she did was no different from sleight of hand, except without the sleight. On the way there, Kaio had checked the garbage can beside the vending machine. The only thing inside was an empty can. In order for Funny Trick to use her magic, she had to check the positions of the things she would swap and ensure that neither would be seen by anyone. Kaio tapped her cape with the tip of her wand, and the bulge of fabric collapsed like a deflated balloon. When she peeled it away, lying there was an empty can. She'd managed to save the girl for now. This magic can come in handy, she thought, looking toward the vending machine. She spotted the delivery girl poking her head out of the garbage can, eyes darting around her surroundings. The station wagon raced by at high speed, and the rainbow magical girl, chasing after it, stopped by the garbage can to drag the delivery girl out of it and yell,
"The two of us can handle the car."
She dragged the delivery girl along in hot pursuit of the fleeing station wagon. Kaio doubted the postal girl even understood what was going on. Once more, the phrase, "pity for a kindred spirit," came to Kaio's mind. Captain Grace. The girl in the rainbow-colored costume and the delivery girl were chasing after the station wagon. With the magical girl's strong legs, they weren't going to fall behind. Captain Grace could leave them be. She had to deal with the other one. Bunny Ears was agile. When the Arabian dancing girl hurled something invisible at her, she evaded it with a hop backward. And when the ballerina lashed out with her billowing ribbons, Bunny Ears grabbed them all at once and yanked to pull her opponent off balance, then followed up with a kick. The ballerina tried to block it with a wall of ribbons, but Bunny Ears kicked right through it and sent her skidding across the road. The fleeing car or Bunny Ears. If Captain Grace was to choose one opponent, it'd be the latter. That one looked like more fun. Thinking about a fight with another magical girl, Umi couldn't help the adventurous spirit boiling over within her. Bunny Ears was a tough opponent. Attacking her didn't ruffle her feathers. She avoided the Arabian dancing girl's airborne strikes easily, dodging the assaults from all directions in a display of impressive technique. Even though some of the attacks came from above and behind, the typical blind spots, she remained unscathed. When Kaio carelessly swiped at her with her wand, Bunny Ears seized her arm, about to swing Kaio around when Umi caught her. Neither the girl in the wedding dress nor the Arabian dancing girl could really make a move. And the indecisive attacks from the variously sized ribbons failed to hit their mark. Everyone was acting frightened. Were they scared of the flame projectiles? Or had they been stunned by the strength of their enemies? This is pathetic. She's unarmed! Umi railed at them all in her mind and examined her opponent once more. Is Bunny Ears a kind of magical girl too? Just like Captain Grace, she was strong. What would happen if magical girls this powerful fought one another? She got excited just thinking about it. Umi Shibahara's rule of thumb was to fight fair and square, face to face. So she circled around to come in front of Bunny Ears, who was avoiding, blocking, and parrying attacks from the other magical girls. Captain Grace turned her one-sided blade around in her grip to swipe the dull end at the enemy, and Bunny Ears instantly squatted to dodge. Then, without even giving Umi the time to think, "Oh, not bad," Bunny Ears put her hand on the ground and kicked. Captain Grace didn't quite fully evade, and blood spurted from her thigh. It was just a scrape, but that injury changed the entire vibe, not within Umi herself, but around her. Their group had become the magical girls of legend, who fought to defeat evil mages in a fairy tale, but actually using weapons and witnessing real bloodshed had shaken them. Kaio, the class rep, and their teacher weren't used to violence, unlike Umi. Umi let out an intentionally loud laugh. If she acted cautious now, their enemy would make light of them, and her allies would lose morale. Their enemies were evil mages. If they were to back down, then the world would be destroyed. Raising her sword above her head, she swung it downward this time. It appeared to be another attack, but this was a feint. To the enemy, it should look like a large opening, and someone as good as Bunny Ears was bound to take advantage. Captain Grace would do just that. "Come on, what's your next attack gonna be?" Umi readied herself, but Bunny Ears turned and made a break for it. She dog-legged past the circle of magical girls around her to make her escape. Captain Grace made a rushed swing at her with her sword, but Bunny Ears ducked low and slipped under the blade. "I'm not letting you away, Fluff Brains." Perhaps the added insult was an expression of irritation toward herself. She swiped at the fleeing enemy, but Bunny Ears was already out of range. In desperation, Umi hurled her sword at her, but Bunny Ears sank low to the ground to duck and went on running on all fours like an animal without ever slowing down. It was frustrating to admit, but when it came to speed and agility over a short distance, Bunny Ears seemed to be superior. They wouldn't know if she had the advantage when it came to long-distance endurance until they tested it. Since Umi didn't know, it was worth trying out. At any rate, she was hot on Bunny Ears' heels, and as long as she didn't let her out of her sight, she had a chance at winning. Her enemy was escaping on all four limbs, just like a real rabbit, and Captain Grace chased close behind. Sprinting straight down the road, they passed in front of the school, then dashed up the wall of the farmer's co-op to leap from that roof and land on top of the warehouse. They raced back down onto the ground where Bunny Ears slowed down just a bit. The distance between them shrank. "I've got her!" Umi reached out, but right before she could grab her enemy's collar, she felt an intense shock in her thigh. She jumped and stopped, settling in a fighting stance. It hadn't come from Bunny Ears. There was no sign that she'd attacked Umi, and she was running off like a literal jackrabbit. And it wasn't long before she disappeared. Captain Grace's eyes darted this way and that. Had someone attacked her? No. No one was paying attention to her now. The road was empty. Was it someone hiding? Where? There was only the sidewalk, the road, and the field behind her. The spot where she'd felt that intense shock was the same spot where she'd gotten scratched after falling to dodge that kick. It wasn't a deep wound at all. She ran her finger through her thigh, along her thigh, and found the scrape was still just a scrape after all. She'd felt shock and pain, but had taken no damage. Still, there was no way she had just imagined that. All that remained was the fact that Umi had let Bunny Ears escape. Rainbow. As is the case with every creature, including humans, each magical girl is different, and these differences are not restricted to their magics. Their physical abilities vary significantly as well. There were many variants among the 4 girls fighting Bunny Ears too. The Arabian dancer was fast. The pirate was also quite agile and strong. Compared to those two, the ribbon girl was much less gifted, but she could still fight. The most the wedding dress girl could probably do would be to create a diversion. Running behind Rainbow was a transformed Tatsuko's Kaki. She was slow-moving. Even compared to the wedding dress girl, frankly speaking, she was a slug. She also didn't look very strong either. Rainbow called out to her with concern.
You okay, Tsuko?
Yeah, I'm okay. Still, it sounded like she could keep up with the car without getting winded, which was a relief. Rainbow continued after the car, maintaining a speed that would not leave Tatsuko behind, but wouldn't let the car pull away from them either. If it kept driving in a straight line, they would have to turn somewhere, as long as they weren't going to take the bypass onto the highway. And once they turned, they wouldn't be able to maintain their speed of over 60 miles per hour. If the girls ventured onto the highway, they'd be able to speed up without any reservations too. In other words, no matter which way the coin fell, it was no problem for them. Rainbow checked that Tatsuko was keeping up, occasionally shooting her concerned glances as they gradually accelerated. The station wagon nearly hit some pedestrians, and cars in the opposing lane were honking up a storm, but it didn't slow down as it careened onto a side road. All right! Kaori and Tatsuko were more familiar with this area. That car was headed for a narrow back road with a lot of turns. Even if they got through all that and came out onto the big road, it was packed with cars on their way back from work all this time of day. Traffic jams weren't unusual. But if they had to take their pick, a back road with fewer eyes was probably better than a major road with a lot of witnesses. Rainbow kicked off a cement block wall, using the recoil to send her into a pine tree, and from there she grabbed some telephone wires and manifested a rainbow bridge that ran in a straight line from beneath her feet right to her goal. It took less than a second. This was Rainbow's magic. And this wasn't a regular rainbow, it was strong. Rainbow ran atop it, making a beeline for the station wagon. Unlike the car, which was forced to turn with the road, she could ignore that and go straight ahead on her bridge through the air. Based on the car's speed, she judged where it would end up and headed to that point. But then something strange happened. Suddenly, smoke spouted out from the back of the station wagon. As Rainbow jumped down from her rainbow bridge, she heard the station wagon crashing into something, and the ground shook. The gray smoke spewed out of the car in an increasingly thick cloud. Covering her mouth, Rainbow looked up. Through the smoke, she could see what looked like figures running along the roofs. They were splitting up to run into different directions. So they put up a smoke screen to split ways and escape, huh? Oh, well, what do we do, Calorie? Asked Tatsuko.
The two of us could split up too, or something.
What?
Okay, let's do that. You chase that one, Zuko. I'll go this way.
Okay. Tatsuko's feet raced up the concrete black ball to run along the roofs. Rainbow was about to take off too when she felt eyes on her and turned to look back. A middle-aged woman was holding a child of about 3 and staring at Rainbow with a look of terror on her face. Rainbow flung her right arm out in the woman's direction, cackled, "Happy Halloween!" Once the woman's expression seemed to say, "Oh, so it's that season?" She wrapped up onto the rooftops. She ran up onto the rooftops there. When? Time remaining. 23 hours, 50 minutes. Every one of Mine Musabia's directions was made on a risk-reward basis. Sometimes her mother would tell her to think about things less in terms of profit and loss, but Mine didn't feel she was wrong. It wasn't like she rejected ideas of friendship and love. If choosing them over money, status, and other important things was still the better option, then that was the choice that should be made. If the things to be gained through study were greater than the pleasure to be gained through play, then it was best to study. If the stress caused by studying outweighed its benefits, then it was best to seek relief in hobbies. In Mine's case, she would go rent anime DVDs to watch. Compare and choose. This was simple and easy to understand. Even when some of her classmates talked behind her back, calling her a suck-up or a teacher's pet, if her status with that teacher was more important than that stress, she would choose that option. She would cut off those types of people and be kind to her other classmates. Doing things like letting people copy her notes or listening to people's problems would gain her rewards. Mine was willing to peddle her benevolence for the advantage of popularity. Now that she had the opportunity to fulfill the dream she'd had since she was little, to be a magical girl, she would do that, of course. Fighting some evil mages was no great price to pay, considering what she got in exchange. The pirate returned, still looking alert. 20 years was gone. It seemed she had to let her quarry escape.
Hey! You can't let them get away!
Toko was hopping mad. She had lined the girls up in a semicircle. Now the pirate was bearing the brunt of her anger. When the rainbow girl and postal delivery girl came back empty-handed too, she exploded.
Why did you let them get away? You had the upper hand. It should have been easy for you. This went to pot because you got cocky. Ugh! You dummy dum-dums.
How can you talk like that when you weren't even fighting? Mine spat out without thinking. Toko's reaction was shrewd.
What? You're the ones not even fighting. I'm the one who made you kids into magical girls, aren't I? Without me, you wouldn't have powers at all. If you were going to whine to me after you let them get away, then I can make someone else a magical girl.
Mine bit her lip. She couldn't deny that venting her irritation like that had been thoughtless, but she was still angry. Right now, at least, Toko was not talking like someone who needed rescuing. Seemingly ignoring... Grady minimized Streamlabs. Seemingly ignoring Toko, the pirate took a step forward. So this injury here, the pirate pointed to her thigh. It was bleeding. Mine looked at it too. It was bleeding because the kick from Bunny Ears had skimmed her, right? It felt like a giant blade was slicing it off. Then like someone was grinding salt into it or going at it with a cheese grater and slathering it with wasabi. Was this, like, that person's magic?
Well, she's an evil mage. Of course she uses magic. More importantly, you've got to go chase after them now and beat them.
Timidly, the rainbow girl raised her hand.
The ones we were chasing used smoke to blind us. The car stopped, but the people inside ran away. We split up and searched the area, but we couldn't find them. But just in case, we did hide their car.
So Mine had been right to judge that a magical girl's strong legs could catch up with a car, and she'd most likely also been correct in thinking that they could handle a fight with its passengers. It hadn't even occurred to her that that their targets would use confusion tactics on them to escape. Mine heaved a sigh. If we don't take a moment to reflect, we won't be able to move on to the next step.
How long are you gonna spend reflecting?
Chasing them
Down comes first. They're evil mages. The world is gonna be in trouble. All your families are in danger.
It'd be best to think it all over rather than pursue them without a plan. Having acquired the fantastic powers of magical girlhood, they had headed out to play with the evil mages, if they could use their powers to their heart's content. Had Mine ever let her guard down? No, she had not. Their opponents were as strong as, or stronger than they were. What's more, she had believed her own powers were strong, but they were nothing to speak of in a battle between magical girls. It had taken all she had to just to visually track the back and forth between the pirate and bunny ears. Her own magic to compel people to keep promises wasn't useful in battle, so there was no helping that. But still, the other magical girls might have had opportunities to use their own abilities, and if she didn't know what those abilities were, then she couldn't give orders to use them. Actually, maybe she should be considering how she could use her own magic for combat purposes. Whatever the case, it would be best to know what the other girls' powers were. I'm with the class rep. The pirate indicated her agreement. But there was something about the way she addressed her that left Mine unsatisfied. She shook her head and pointed to herself. I'm not the class representative. I'm Wedden. My magical girl name is Wedden. Since this was the character she'd become now, she should make that clear. When a villain was yelling the heroine's name, it was always, damn you, Cutie Red, never, damn you, Yoshiko Takanashi. I get it. We didn't even know each other's names, huh? We'll never be able to cooperate like that. So, I'm Captain Grace. Glad to be working together, Wedden. Likewise, Captain Grace. They shook hands and gave each other little nods. They were probably thinking along similar lines. I was chomping at the bit, so I kind of rushed things. First, let's introduce ourselves, and not just our names, but our powers. And if you can, how strong you are physically, too. Toko complained so loudly that Wedden was impressed by the racket coming from such a tiny fairy.
Boo, boo! Forget that! Let's hurry! They're getting away!
Of course we're gonna catch those guys. Duh. But even so, we gotta give this thing our all, right? You know that saying about how even a lion runs its fastest to catch a rabbit? Agreed, said Wedden.
They will do that reflecting thing too. You're all driving me crazy! Ah! You have to beat those people up or you can't become official magical girls, okay? Learning from our mistakes is well and good, but why don't we do it somewhere else?
Suggested the ribbon girl. That must be Miss Himeno. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that was Rainbow. Learning from our mistakes is all well and good, but why don't we do it somewhere else? Suggested the ribbon girl. That must be Miss Himeno. Perhaps she worried people might see them, so she was surveying the area. The asphalt was so badly eroded and broken up that it would need repair after the pounding from their magical girl legs. A trash can lay in the middle of the road. Plus, they all looked like cosplayers. There had been no people around before. There were houses nearby. Now some rubberneckers were looking their way, perhaps startled by all the commotion. An old couple doing farm work were pointing at them and commenting, "Must be filming some kind of TV show." A middle aged woman, who seemed like a housewife, was staring at them as if they had two heads. A 5-year-old girl stood in awe, her eyes agleam. This crowd was bound to get bigger. The Japanese police were a formidable bunch. Patrol cars were sure to show up soon, too. Chapter 2: Drowning in Love and Hearts. Nanako-san, a pro baseball player developing a special throw to strike out one ace batter after another. A cop surviving a fierce firefight in order to apprehend a vicious criminal, even after shotguns came into play. A pirate investigator gathering all those involved in a case into one big room to unveil deductions and brilliantly point out the culprit. These popular and dramatic exploits can only be enjoyed in fiction. For the people who actually work in these professions, such stories are ultimately considered pure fantasy, good for a laugh or two at most. With magical girls, however, some of them would refuse to let such a fantastical, daring feats remain in the realm of amusing anecdotes. Since she specialized in mental health-focused guidance, the magical girl Nanako-san, pronounced Nanako-san, spelled 7753, pronounced Nanako-san, had plenty of opportunities to meet colleagues who desperately pursued that dream. These girls spent their days in training, dreaming of fighting as in an as yet seen but powerful foe. It might be an evil archfiend, a malevolent god, a twisted science experiment, or an assassin sent from another world. And there were far more of these girls than professional baseball players seriously trying to develop their own unique pitch. Nanako-san didn't even have enough fingers to count all the ones she had met personally. For example, one self-righteous girl had proclaimed she was training in preparation for the threat to the world that would one day come. Her training ground had been littered with the fragments of boulders she had kicked into bits. Looking into her beautiful, sparkling eyes, Nanako-san hadn't been able to say, "If the world were ever on the verge of crisis, then some other, stronger person would handle it. There would be no job for you." Or, "Before you worry about any worldwide threats, worry about the safety of your hometown, please." The most she could manage was a weak smile on her face and an order to clean up the scattered rock debris. Nanako-san hadn't seen that girl again since her reassignment. Was she still dreaming about the global crisis that was bound to happen someday and destroying boulders? Another magical girl had sought out opponents worth fighting. To her, battle itself was the goal, and ideological issues such as justice and evil were mere distractions. Once that girl had touched the trunk of a big tree, and the opposite side tore open in a great blast, its leaves scattered all around. Nanako-san had thought, "I've seen that move in some manga before," but she didn't say so. The most she could do was smile weakly and advise the girl to refrain from destroying the environment. "This is what I am now," the girl had said. "My abilities have reached a far point beyond what your average magical girl can achieve." "Uh-huh. Master, give me a chance. Please, give me a place to wield my powers." "Uh-huh." Before long, that girl was reassigned. Nanako-san could only pray she'd manage to go somewhere she could wield her power. Sometimes she was visited by scholarly types who believed magic is a technology to be systemized and researched instead of something vague and indeterminate. There had been some revolutionaries, too, who believed, "We have the powers that surpass scientific civilization, so shouldn't we be the ones to rule and unify the world? Humans work only for their own selfish aims, and we can't leave this to them any longer." She also encountered patriots who insisted, "The power of magical girls is necessary to reverse the nation's decline and stagnation. We could be the greatest force for national security." One magical girl had claimed, "We should go beyond our local districts and actively involve ourselves in human affairs. If magical girls make a serious effort to tackle these issues, We can prevent tragedies. Then flown off to the Middle East and toppled a government. Afterward, she had gone around beating up bad magical girls one after another, winning her the violent nickname of the Magical Girl Hunter. Nanako-san had known for quite some time what the Magical Kingdom was using her for. The ones they sent to her were all problem children, drunk on their dreams and power. Then, after beating 1 week and 6 months of time with her, they would be transferred elsewhere. Magical girls were sent to her and taken away, one after another, like a conveyor belt. Nanako-san was obligated to hand in reports about them, so she wrote them up based on the information she'd learned through her magical ability and submitted them. Oops, sorry. Nanako-san's special power was data visualization. There was nothing noble or challenging about what she did. Her ability and the results she got from it were quite insignificant. She would examine a subject through her magical goggles and see the great variety of data displayed in them. They showed her something like a status screen in a role-playing game. When the subject was in her goggle sights, there would sound an electronic beep beep beep, and then the data would display. Just by adjusting the dial, she could attain practically limitless information, from the broader parameters of intelligence, endurance, and combat power to more fine-grained detail like arm strength, grip strength, pinch strength, finger strength, fingernail hardness, etc. And the information she could learn was not just limited to traits that could be expressed in numbers. It included everything from hobbies to likes to, even if the subject was a magical girl, her own unique magic. The numerical values of abilities were displayed in heart symbols, and sentences were written in a very cutesy, childlike manner, all oddly typical of a magical girl. This ability was useful to the Magical Kingdom for uncovering magical girls who could pose trouble. No matter how you tried to hide things, you couldn't deceive Nanako-san's magic, and undetected problem children became exposed problem children so that the Magical Kingdom could know. Though most of the problem children didn't even try to hide it. Nanako-san calmly completed the tasks assigned to her. If this was the work the Magical Kingdom wanted from her, then there was nothing for it but to meet their demands. It wasn't as if she had come up with other ways of using her powers. She could have gone to a bigger city to search for criminals to unmask. She could set out to countries where terrorism was rampant and round up the dangerous people who lived in hiding among innocent civilians. Those things would surely have been a worthwhile use of her magic, but she wasn't going to oppose the Magical Kingdom to do it. If they demanded she use her powers to uncover these problem children, then she would go along with that. 7 years had passed since Kotori Nanaya had gained the powers of the magical girl Nanako-san, and that a young magical girl brimming with hopes and dreams was now a veteran. She was more world-weary now. She wasn't drunk on her own power either. Tons of magical girls out there were more powerful than she was. And even if she did seek out the ultimate strength, the only one to decide how that would be used was the Magical Kingdom. The Magical Kingdom was not suffering financial stress, yet they kept a tight budget. Basically, they were cheapskates. As a rule, magical girls were volunteers who slaved away for no pay, and if you didn't like it, you were told to quit. Often rather frankly, depending on the person. Nanako-san had heard some graphic rumors about some magical girls being on welfare so they could focus on their magical girl activities, but those were probably just rumors. Even the unabashedly exploitive Magical Kingdom did sometimes pay money. They doled out a regular chain of treats in the form of salary to hold on to certain personnel they wanted to keep in their sights. Only a few magical girls received the salary, like the managers who coordinated a whole region, or the scouts who discovered talent, or those with abilities, skills, experience, or magic that would allow them to work for the Magical Kingdom in a specialized capacity. Nanako-san was one of these individuals, and is one affiliated with the Magical Girl Resources Department, like Human Resources, but for magical girls, she received a regular paycheck from the magical kingdom. While this was an honor, it narrowed her options. If she had a normal human job, if she were to quit being a magical girl, she could make a living. But unlike those who did this work as a side job, a full-timer had nowhere to run. There are many jobs, like professional go or shogi player, um, singer, actor, entertainer, manga artist, novelist, or pro athlete. But that will leave you with no other marketable skills if you fail. But all of these careers, magical girl is the worst of all. If a shogi player or a manga artist fails, they still retain their experience and skills. But a magical girl isn't even left with that, since her memory will be erased. She becomes a completely blank slate, literally left with nothing. A human with no skills, no experience, and no work history, flung right out into the middle of the raging waves of the world. Each time this thought would pop back in her mind, Nanako-san would shudder. She had no options left in life now other than being a magical girl. Magical girls with dreams, those who wanted to get stronger and shoot for their goals, were beautiful. More than a few times, Nanako-san had felt a longing to be like that, but had never gone beyond longing. People always admire those who live a life they can't. She didn't actually have to follow the same path herself. Nanako-san did not live in dreams, but in reality. A full-time magical girl did not receive benefits. But Nanako-san's cash income was not by any means small. Keeping moderation in mind as much as possible, refraining from wasteful spending, and saving up her income, just recently she had finally managed to save 10 million yen. Her pocketbook gave her a solid sense of satisfaction, and looking at the numbers, she quietly cried. Nanako-san had heard of some magical girls who had amassed wealth by doing evil, but she wasn't going to take any risks. Getting fired over something like that would be getting her priorities backward. She would save slowly and steadily, but she didn't mind doing it the hard way. Her saving was going well, but it still wasn't enough. She would have a long life after she quit being a magical girl. The house she was living in now had been built more than 30 years ago. After rebuilding and renovating and various other things, 10 million yen would be used up in a flash. A few years ago, both her parents had passed away, one after the other. Left to her were some meager savings and stock certificates, as well as their house and land parcel. She had only met her relatives on the occasion of her parents' death. She hadn't seen them since. The time after her parents' passing had been full of upheaval. First, her boss was demoted. Her direct superior, the one person she might have been able to rely on aside from her parents, had been very much a competent woman, the type who always looked crisply put together. She had guaranteed Nanako-san, "If anything happens, I'll cover for you." But due to the misconduct of a different subordinate, something Nanako-san had no power over, her boss had been demoted. And even though they had worked together for years, she hadn't been able to say goodbye. Immediately afterward, she had met the replacement. The replacement was a vaguely capricious-seeming magical girl. She didn't strike Nanako-san as reliable compared to her former boss. According to hearsay, she was an up-and-comer who had shot up through the ranks. In the nastier rumors, she said she just got her way up through nepotism thanks to someone in her family with deep connections to magical girls. Her nature was as elusive as the airy impression she gave off. If Nanako-san were to use her magic, she might have been able to find out what sort of person she really was. And Nanako-san had always removed her goggles in front of her boss. Of course, using her goggles on her boss was bound to offend her, and it was rude to assess someone's data without permission, no matter who it was. Her new boss had taken Nanako-san's goggles in hand with deep interest and said, "I'll take these for now." Nanako-san explained that without them, she would be unable to perform her regular duties, but her boss didn't listen and just carried them off. Then a few days later, the goggles were sent back to her by mail. Attached to them was a letter that read, "They've been improved. We've made it so that the goggles can transfer information directly to us, so from now on, written reports will be unnecessary." Nanako-san balled the letter up and threw it in the trash. In an openly contemptuous way to talk to someone, the letter also informed her of many things she hadn't been aware of, like how if she detransformed while the goggles were away from her, the goggles would remain where they were, and that they could be modified despite their magical nature. At that time, she was too angry to be surprised. Not only had her boss taken away her goggles, the foundation of Nanako-san's magical girl existence, she had tweaked them without asking permission or apology. What she could learn from this was that her boss was selfish and pragmatic. She hadn't looked through the goggles to acquire this information, but she was certain this impression was true. The new boss didn't seem any more reliable than her previous one. In fact, it seemed to Nanako-san that if she looked to her for help for the wrong thing, she was apt to be discarded. At the time, Nanako-san had lamented her wretched life. Being placed under such a miserable boss made her depressed. Eventually, months passed, spring became summer, and summer turned to fall. People are self-interested creatures. As her life went on by without any serious problems, she came to think, it's actually easier to not have to write reports. I like it. The information Nanako-san could acquire with her magic was extremely detailed, and that had made for a lot of time taken writing reports. Thanks to the modification on her goggles, there was no more of that, and she could take it easy. What's more, she had pessimistically believed she'd be stuck with a pitiful salary until her death, but it was raised by 30%. She was even grateful to her boss, like a capable employee working briskly under an elite. The evening she heard about her raise, she opened up the 3 foreign-made dark beers she'd won from a raffle in the shopping district. The bottles were shaped differently from the Japanese standard, with an interesting acute angle to them. Being the first alcohol she'd had in a long time, the beer hit her hard. The thrills of humanity were pretty weak compared to being a magical girl. Oh, baby. Having some financial leeway eased her heart. When cleaning her house, she even started paying close attention to the details, like door frames and window frames. She switched from herbicides to weeding her yard by hand, and even considered planting some vegetables. And so Nanako-san's lifestyle became more fulfilling. And going to work, which had felt like a hassle before, was now something she could do with a smile. And so it had been until now. She woke up and gazed vacantly at an unfamiliar ceiling until she remembered that she was staying at a hotel. This was her first business trip in a long while. Someone else was doing the cooking and cleaning for her. The magical kingdom was paying for her food and transportation costs. Though the room was so tiny that she hit her head getting into the bath, the hotel conferred a rare happiness to someone who lived on her own. Magical girls mainly worked at night, so she went back to sleep once more, and then a second time, savoring the blissful experience. Once it was evening, she leisurely rose from bed. After getting up, Kotori Nanaya immediately washed her face. She had to, or she wouldn't wake up properly. The magical facial cleanser her old boss had given her thoroughly cleansed away the excess oil. At a sparsely populated buffet, she read the evening paper over a salad and some sausage. The crunchy texture of the lettuce was pleasant. As she spread apricot jam on her bread, she quenched her thirst with lukewarm milk. She shot a vague glance at the TV. An evening news show was on. Seeing the teenage girls on screen giggling exuberantly, she thought, "Ah, they're so pretty." If she hadn't gotten these powers, maybe she would have had such an adolescence. All she'd ever thought was about being a magical girl, and her life as a human had been secondary. She'd figured stuff like fashion and dieting and makeup had nothing to do with her, but getting another look at her face in the mirror now, maybe she looked older than her age. Gold will sparkle beautifully even without polish, but iron merely rusts. Since Coterie had come all this way to B City, she'd made a reservation at a beauty salon. It was so famous it even had been featured in a magazine. She told herself that ultimately she was just taking the opportunity while she was on her business trip. Wait, no, it's not just a side thing, she corrected herself. That wasn't a waste of time to begin with. It was a necessary expense. Balancing things between her human life and magical girl life would make her time more fulfilling, or it should. It was true that if she stayed transformed, she could cut a lot of expenses, primarily food. When she'd first become a magical girl, she lived that way to save money. But just because transforming would make her pretty didn't mean she could neglect her grooming when she was in human form. With each year that passed, the weight of that fact became heavier. Once you were an adult, you had to function in a social environment, even just going out to do a little shopping. Coterie came back to her room and checked her schedule book. She'd never carried around anything this stylish before. It was a pretty fancy one with a leather cover. If it hadn't been for her raise, she never would have bought something like this. Who knew getting a raise could feel this good? It was like the world had done an about face. She was very much struck by how systems like age-based promotion, periodic raises, and lifetime employment would get such a firm grip on people's hearts. The plan for today was to meet with a magical girl who would come to her for training. That was scheduled late at night, so during the day she would go to the beauty salon for her appointment. She made a mental note of what she needed to do and what she wanted to do, and she was carefully calling the list when her magical phone rang. It was from her boss. It was unusual for her to call instead of messaging. Kotori transformed into Nanako-san and took her magical phone in hand. Her post-transformation voice was different from her human one. Answering a work call without transforming was bound to get her needled for carelessness. Magical girl manners were tedious in the oddest ways. Hello, this is Nanako-san. We have emergency business. Inspectors have been sent to B City. Nanako-san could sense the anxiety in her voice. B City had to refer to this town, where Nanako-san was currently staying for her business trip. She was confused by the inspector's part, as she wasn't sure who was to be inspecting what, and took several moments to think before responding. Inspectors? Investigators. Who investigate magical girl crimes. Oh, I see. The inspection team acquired information that a dangerous criminal was hiding in the city and went there. They came into contact with the criminal not long ago, but the enemy's forces were greater than anticipated, so the team has made a retreat. Reflexively, Nanako-san's hand clenched her magical phone. So what does that mean, exactly? I'm told there have been casualties, and there is also a request for support from the magical girls in the area. That includes you, since you're in B City for your business trip. I really want to have one of my people there. You are fortunate enough to be there already, so you'll go. This wasn't fortunate. It was the worst kind of bad luck. If it's that dangerous, I'll just get in the way. You can't leave the city anyway. The Department of Diplomacy has erected a barrier with the request for support as their pretext. Pardon? Officially, they say this is to prevent the criminal from fleeing, but to the magical girls within the city, it's tantamount to being locked in. The barrier prevents any magical elements from passing through. That includes anyone in human form. That's crazy! Since you can't get out, at any rate, it'll be much safer for you to stick together with the investigation specialist rather than be alone. If you act on your own without knowing what you're doing, the team might decide you're one of the criminal's cohorts and attack you. Well, but...
I'll message you the details. You don't have much time. Report in secret. Don't make any decisions on your own, no matter how trivial. And take care of yourself. Her final remark seemed to Nanako-san like a perfunctory afterthought. But maybe it was just her victim complex talking. Her route was falling apart. Her routine was falling apart. For a while, she was dazed, unable to think at all, feeling as if some outside force was pulling her strings. Nanako-san checked her messages. There was one from her boss. She immediately opened it and ran her eyes over the text. It said she was to meet the inspection team at the hotel in front of the station. The meeting time was very soon. Her boss urged her to go while in human form. In a stupor, she thought, I'll cancel my appointment in the salon for now. Kotori decided to walk around town before going to meet the inspection team. When she stepped outside, the sky was covered in thick clouds, a dark, ashen canopy stretching endlessly to the limits of the horizon. It had been brighter inside with the lights on than it was outside. Even though it was late afternoon, it was so dark it seemed night was about to fall. It was like a symbol of her fate. She felt weary. It was 5 minutes walking from the hotel where she'd been staying to the intersection. The city limits were right close by. The air didn't taste particularly nice. The briskness of it stung her throat. It was just a semi-rural area. The intersection near the station had a lot of foot traffic for the edge of town. Men and women who looked like white-collar workers and students in coats walked by without giving her a glance. They all stopped together at the red light. Then at the green light, they all started up again. Kotori walked along with them, but before she could reach the other side of the crosswalk, her forehead hit an invisible wall, and then she doubled over. She hadn't just run into a hard wall. The moment she touched it, she couldn't even stay upright. She wanted to yell, but her voice caught in her throat. Her head felt numb all the way to the core. Her vision went red for an instant, then gradually eased back. Wrapping her arms around herself, she slumped to the ground. A powerful wave of dizziness washed over her. She couldn't breathe. She wasn't even sure which direction was down. She had been walking on the edge of the crosswalk, so nobody bumped into her from behind. But she couldn't avoid the suspicious looks from people walking down the street. Rolling, crawling, scrambling, she made her way back to the sidewalk, and when people addressed her with concern, asking if she was okay, she waved them off with a weak smile and finally stood up, using a roadside tree for support. The corners of her mouth felt cold, and when she ran her hand over her lips, she found they were covered in saliva. She pulled out her handkerchief and wiped it off. So this was the barrier. Regular people might come in and go as normal, but Nanako-san couldn't proceed any farther. Though she'd been told that anything magical would be repelled, she hadn't thought it would hurt this badly. Even just touching it would be sure to take you out of the fight. She shuddered to think about what would have happened if she had unknowingly tried to leave the barrier in a car or a train. Having given up and about ready to go back, Kotori noticed the green pedestrian crossing light had stopped blinking and rushed off in a panic. Pulling out her magical phone, she checked the time. It was only a bit longer until the meeting. With a light swipe of her finger, she first checked the map of the area, then located the nearby playground and headed in its direction. Sitting down on the bench, she opened up her messages and browsed the documents her boss had sent her. The documents included information on the criminal, although their name and affiliation was as yet unknown, basically a mystery killer. As she read up on their MO of hacking up victims with a large blade, her Kotori felt herself wilting. She was being forced to investigate someone like this. All the victims were connected to the magical kingdom. Whistleblowers, administrators who had been scheduled to appear in court as important material witnesses, examiners who had supposedly accepted bribes, and magical girls rumored to have loaned items from the magical kingdom to organize crime. It was all written quite frankly. Kotori was shaken. She wondered if it was okay for her to know all these details, but at the same time, the fact that so many local magical girls had gone without their business, completely oblivious to these events, made her vaguely fearful. Just how many of them were killed in the line of duty? But that was just the beginning. Scrolling down the page, terms like undercover investigation and double agent and cover-up jumped out at her. She immediately put her magical phone into sleep mode. She tossed it into the tote bag hanging from her shoulder as she stood. After 2 pats to the seat of her skirt, she bought a black coffee from the vending machine and returned to the bench. There was an old man fishing in the pond in the park. His life must be so carefree and easygoing. Kotori's jealousy cut deep. The dangerous job of investigating a criminal, more specifically, apprehending a criminal, a task she'd never been involved with before, had now been thrust upon her. Nanako-san had just happened to be in this city by coincidence, and her boss, who she believed was a capable individual, had given her this preposterous order. Kotori's instincts were right after all. Her boss was a pragmatist who didn't understand people's feelings. She shouldn't have trusted her just because she'd decreased Nanako-san's workload and given her a raise. But regret it as she might, it was already too late. A capable supervisor like hers would also expect her subordinates to be capable too. But what could she want from Nanako-san? The most experience she had with violence was intervening in a fight between drunks. No, her boss was not the capable type at all. She was an incompetent who'd mistakenly believed she was talented. If she really were capable, she would have a firm grasp of her subordinate's skills and say something like, "Some conflict may break out in B City. We are staying right now, so please remain on standby in as safe a place as possible." Nanako-san griped furiously about her supervisor, but she couldn't abandon the job she'd been assigned. It was rough working for the man, or the kingdom in this case. Sipping her coffee slowly, Kotori checked her magical phone again. Once she'd heard that in the information field, sharing unsolicited secrets with someone could make them feel closer to you, and you could use that to drag them onto your side. Kotori couldn't help but feel as though she was being given information that she fundamentally shouldn't know. The coffee she'd drunk was hitting her stomach. This wasn't simply a list of documents. Great pains had been taken to provide detailed explanations for the reader's sake. Magical girls had been killed in their homes while they were de-transformed too. Their addresses were strictly managed. It wasn't information accessible to the general public of the magical kingdom, to say nothing of the fact that if you were high up enough to figure out secret identities, you'd have to be in the upper echelons or possibly right at the core of the organization. Suspicions were erupting among concerned personnel that a political purge by some power could be underway, ridding themselves of individuals who were inconvenient to them. Within this cesspool of suspicions, various powers had offered their cooperation in this investigation. Among these were Kotori's own Magical Girl Resource Department and the Department of Diplomacy, which had erected this barrier. The purpose of the barrier might be to create an alibi. They had cooperated with the investigation so that they had no connection with the criminal. Their goal could be to let the criminal escape if things went well, or if left with no choice, they would kill the criminal to silence them. Even these details were explained in full, adding to Kotori's woe. If it wasn't as if she had absolutely no ambitions for promotion, but that was motivated by the plebeian desire to get a higher wage for a better lifestyle. She had absolutely no desire to get involved in a tug-of-war between factions, assassinations, political purges, or anything like that. That was way too dangerous. The inspection squad, currently in B City, was made up of three people. From the inspection department, there was Hana, Gekujo, and Mana. There was also Archfiend Palm, who had been assigned to them from a different department. Hana, Gekujo, and Mana were specialists in inspection and investigation. The documents said Archfiend Palm was currently attached to the Magical Kingdom's Department of Diplomacy, but she had been temporarily assigned to the team in a combat capacity, since her presence had been deemed necessary for arresting such a vicious criminal. With the addition of Nanako-san, affiliated with the Magical Girl Resources Department, their mixed team was complete. However, it was particularly unsettling that the Department of Diplomacy had clearly enlisted combat personnel. The part Nanako-san had just read, about the goal being to silence people, began to feel real. They might believe Nanako-san herself was there for similar reasons. The mere fact that she'd been forced onto their team was suspicious enough. They wouldn't welcome a compulsory addition. Making up her mind to at least do her best not to arouse suspicion, she scrolled down to the next page. The criminal's accomplice had been identified as the mascot Toko. The recently developed state-of-the-art magical phones contained magical talent search tools that had greater directivity than previous models, but the device also left a record of each use with the Magical Kingdom Inspection Headquarters. This was a hidden function kept secret from all but the handful of people involved with the project. Basically, this meant that the Magical Kingdom was keeping a close eye on how the function was used. All the magical girls in active service had to have felt, once or twice, just how much of a sieve the Magical Kingdom's surveillance was. A certain number of troublemakers had always slipped through the net to work nasty side jobs. It was no surprise that those in power had decided to do something about the situation. As for the top secret observation part, that did make Nanako-san feel a little of the tight, suffocating stranglehold created by a secret police for a society full of moles and spies, but it was still better than an observational system with massive leaks that let everyone do what they wanted. This was the mechanism that had caught Toko. The mascot was a shrewd scout. Her colleagues had described her behind her back as the slave dealer. As could be surmised from her nickname, she was competent, but had little left for magical girls. She would create them at random, and those who had talent she would guide with care, but she didn't care at all what happened to the rest. Anytime a prospect seemed unlikely to gain Toko any prestige, she would easily rid herself of the girl. Rumor had it that when former recruits came to her for advice, she would treat them coldly. Her poorly formed policy was, as long as they got talent, I won't worry about the little things. Which meant she had raised a number of talented magical girls so far. But though they were talented in terms of ability, personality-wise, well, you get the picture. Sorry, I lost my place. Oh, and so since Toko had achieved some degree of success, she got priority distribution of the experimental new phone. She'd used it and ultimately been caught. She had been found at the scene of a certain crime and subsequently exposed. The victims had been brutally murdered by a large blade, something a mascot didn't have the strength to wield. Toko had been the one to use the magical phone, but someone else had carried out the crime. That someone had probably been discovered by Toko. A master had raising talent and trained in secret as a magical girl who specialized in killing. The conclusion derived from the pattern of victims and Toko's position was Toko couldn't be the real one behind this. there was some other person or organization giving her orders. That was the reason that the upper echelons of the magical kingdom were filled with such trepidation about which departments would be involved with this. Nanako-san could deduce that this was also why she herself had been forced into this investigation unit. Katori tilted the can of coffee. A few drops fell onto her tongue, but after that, no matter how she shook the can, nothing more came out. Sighing, she tossed the empty container at the garbage bin by the vending machine and missed. The can rolled onto the pavement. Sighing one more time, she stood, picked it up, and put it in the garbage. Before she left the park, she peeked into the bucket sitting beside the old fisherman. There was only water inside and no catch. Katori sighed a third time, and the old man glared at her. Tugging the lapels of her coat closer, she hurriedly left the park. They were to meet in a karaoke parlor box. It was at a well-known chain that also had a branch in Kotori's hometown. But both the building itself and the parking lot at this one were much smaller and older. The automatic doors opened and closed stiffly, as if they were about to get stuck. Maybe rust was the cause, or perhaps the whole plot of land was sinking due to land subsidence, or the building could just be crooked. They all looked plausible. She got the feeling that even the staff weren't all that friendly, but of course she didn't let that show. Katori informed them that she wanted to join up with the group in room number 12 and headed off that way. Sound leaked from the doors on either side of her as she made her way through the hall. Business was booming. It seemed the place was more popular than she'd assumed. She stopped before a plate with the number 12 written on it. Before entering the room, she checked her palms. They were shining with sweat. She wiped them off with her handkerchief. It wasn't wearing a coat indoors that made her palms sweaty. It was nerves. Switching her bag from her right to left shoulder, she cleared her throat 2-3 times, then knocked. The sounds coming from inside abruptly stopped. I'll share this picture now. There's Mana on the left, and Hana Gekukujo, Ripple, and Archfiend Palm.
Come in.
Pardon me. Katori pushed the door open. Warm air caressed her face through the gap. She focused her gaze and faltered. There were 4 magical girls. 4? She was confused. Why was there an extra girl? She hadn't been listed in the briefing. What was the meaning of this? All 4 were already transformed. One girl was in a miniskirt yukata, and had bunny ears. Another wore a black dress and coat. She had little horns on her head. Both appeared to be in their early teens, typical magical girls. The third girl, however, was less typical. She wore a ninja-style costume and had a scar from a sword wound over her left eye. The arm cover on her left arm was loose below the elbow, too. One eye and one arm. Her remaining right eye glinted as it caught Katori's gaze, and Katori reflexively looked away. She felt cold shivers coming from the pit of her stomach. This magical girl oozed violence. Okay, so there's just 10 pages left. We like to give a little 10-page warning. 10 pages left for reading today, not the book. I'm not that fast of a reader. The 4th girl wasn't scary, but something about her felt off. Like the other 3, she appeared to be in her teens, yet she was somehow different. She wore round, frameless glasses, her hair was gathered casually in the back, and her costume was plain. Less a costume and more casual, like normal clothes. She wore a plain navy blue skirt, a loose tunic the color of fresh green grass, a gray cardigan, and beige cotton pants. She left a brown coat folded over the armrest of the sofa, and on her feet were sneakers of some foreign brand Katori didn't recognize. There was a faint sprinkle of freckles on her cheeks, and you could sense a strong will in her furrowed brow. She wore an irritated expression. The girl with the glasses glared at the newcomer. Kotori didn't miss the creases between her eyebrows. And here comes the adventurer who doesn't even know the basics of investigation, barging in to mess up the crime scene.
Come on now.
The funny-eared girl raised a hand in meditation. Mediation.
She's helping us out. You can't talk like that.
The girl stood up and bowed her head, her bunny ears bouncing along with it. They were so cute that in spite of herself, Nanako-san wanted to reach out and touch them.
You're Nanako-san, right? My name is Hanaka Kokujo.
Oh, yes. Thank you for your courtesy. I'm Nanako-san. Nanako-san hurriedly bobbed her head up and down, or down and up. Mana introduced the others, one by one, gesturing to each girl as she went.
The glasses girl over there is chief of our team, Mana.
Who are you calling Glasses Girl? Ignoring Mana's obvious displeasure, Mana continued.
This is Archfiend Palm. Like you shall be working together with us on this operation.
The girl in the dress coat gave a small smile and dipped her head, saying, Good to be working with you. This was apparently Archfiend Palm. Now that it was pointed out to her, Palm did indeed seem to have a devilish motif. Her dress coat was all black, and the wiggling, eel-like thing poking out from the bottom of her coat might be her devil tail. The word Archfiend was probably why descriptors like lips redder than blood and hair blacker than darkness were coming to mind. However, her smile seemed more unreliable than kind, and her sleepy-looking eyelids were more Buddha-like than devilish.
And that's Ripple.
Expression blank, the one-armed ninja bowed her head. Ripple. It sounded familiar. Maybe she looked familiar? She'd seen that name somewhere before, but it hadn't been on the list of the inspection team members. Kotori dug through her memories, wondering where on earth she'd seen that name. It was recently. She had the feeling it was pretty important, but she couldn't remember.
You're a bit slow.
Oh, sorry. You're a bit slow on the uptake, Mana muttered loud enough to be heard. How long are you going to stand there? We have no time as it is. Oh, of course, sorry. Do karaoke boxes have a seating order? Kotori had never heard of such a thing. The girls were sitting on a couch surrounding the table, with what looked like documents spread out on it. From what Kotori was facing, in the back of the left was Mana, with Hana sitting beside her, and then a space, then Ripple. Archfiend Palm was alone on the right side, sitting daintily and slightly removed from the rest of the group. Ripple stood and opened up a space for Kotori to sit. Right now, even this small kindness was something to be grateful for. Sorry for assuming based solely on your appearance that you only know how to fight. She mentally apologized, sitting down on the sofa. First, remove your coat. Right. As Mana instructed, Kotori took off her coat. There was a coat hanger by the door, but in order to use that, she'd have to make Ripple get up again. So she silently placed her coat atop the backrest. And transform. Right. Kotori transformed into Nanako-san. She'd never transformed in front of others, so she was a little embarrassed. She then took off her goggles and placed them on top of the table. All right, well, I'll explain things one more time for the latecomer. Irritation dripped from every word out of Mana's mouth. Nanako-san quietly looked down. You will remain in magical form at all times, until the criminal is apprehended. Mana glanced over at Archfiend Palm. Archfiend Palm tilted her head and gave a quiet smile. Mana harumphed and continued, or killed. You're not permitted to de-transform. We're dealing with a vicious criminal here, and there's no guarantee they won't ambush us. Until I have judged that there will be no more combat, absolutely do not undo your transformation. Do not, under any circumstances, assume you will be fast enough to transform after you're attacked. Some bird brains don't understand just how much faster magical girl reaction time is compared to a human's. It felt like Nanako-san was being attacked for carelessly strolling in as a human. She ducked her head even lower. There's already been one casualty. Be sure to stay on guard at all times. The weight of the word casualty came down hard on her chest. If there would be another death, then who would it be? If one of the group was a lot less used to combat, then they were the prime candidate. Just thinking about it made her shiver. Mana glanced over at Archstream Palm and continued. The barrier erected by the Department of Diplomacy will last 24 hours, and once it wears off, they won't be able to just throw it back up again. We will apprehend the criminal while the barrier is still active. Stupid Department of Diplomacy, Nanako-san whined in her head. Why did you have to do this? But even if she were to voice these complaints, nobody would listen. While we're moving from place to place, hide your costume under a long coat with a big hat or scarf and such. A surgical mask is also a good idea, since more than a few people will be wearing them to prevent seasonal flu and colds. Those who did not come with attire prepared must purchase it themselves. Now Nanako-san understood the reason Mana had told her to take off her coat. Because if she transformed without removing it, the coat would disappear until she canceled the transformation. But she still had no hat or surgical mask. She'd have to pick some up. Would the magical kingdom foot the bill? For now, she would hold on to the receipts. If you use this, Mana pointed to the wooden stick lying on the top of the table. It was about a foot long and completely unadorned. It won't be impossible to find the individuals we're after. Her phrasing was oddly roundabout. It's a primitive magic. It indicates direction, but can't tell you precise locations. Our professional, who used more advanced search methods, is gone. She was killed. On the karaoke monitor, a pop group famous for having a lot of members was dancing. They were all arranged like Tetris blocks. Combined with the total silence of the muted TV, it was slightly creepy. The bright lights spilling from the screen lit Mana's face red. The soft hairs on her cheek shone. That's all. If you have any questions, go ahead. Ripple raised her hand, and Mana stared daggers at her. What is it? For someone who had invited questions, Mana seemed rather unwilling to answer. Whether Ripple noticed that or not, she began to speak in a murmur. You said there's been a death, so the fighting's already begun. One of our members was killed in a retreat. She abandoned the car and ran, but the enemy caught up to her and broke her neck with a single strike. That's all. Her manner of speaking, as she said, that's all, was simple, but her expression was not. Every inch of it was twisted in a rage. Silently, Nanako-san averted her gaze. She was scared. Could you give us any details about the enemy? Ripple asked. Mana snorted. I've written up a memo on their general characteristics and made copies. Check that. A pirate, a stage magician, an Arabian dancing girl, ribbons, a postal delivery girl, a wedding dress. The sheer number was more frightening to Kotori than their descriptions. Why were there so many? This document only lists what they look like, said Ripple. That's all we know, so that's all I've written down. I shouldn't have to explain that. But what if I told you it wasn't even a real fight? That we fled for our lives and one of our own was killed in the process? That we requested backup? Happy now, you little shit? No. Nanako-san continued to look away, but even so, she knew exactly what kind of expression was on Mana's face. It felt like her fury was swallowing up this small room. Like chili pepper dissolved in water, it hurt even to touch it. The only remaining sounds were Mana's breathing and the karaoke commercials repeating over and over again. The interval between each breath gradually lengthened, and eventually Mana punched the desk, drowning out all the jingles. God damn it. We really have no time, and all of us gathered here are good at combat. Even if we're not as good as you. But I'm not good at it, Nanako-san screamed internally. In this situation, we've got to fight. You may not like it, but you're going to do the job. Mana and Ripple stared at each other for a little while. On Mana's end, she was wearing more of a scowl, and on Ripple's, she seemed to be sizing Mana up. Mana held Ripple's gaze to the end, but Ripple slowly closed her eyes. Understood. Don't give in, Ripple. Try harder. The cries of Nanako-san's heart reached no one and vanished. All the others were picking up their outerwear and coats and scarves and getting ready to go. Nanako-san hid her reluctance. She dawdled in putting on her coat. She'd bought it for when she was in human form. The classy charcoal gray was too drab for a magical girl, and it was too big. She equipped her goggles, and then when she was buttoning up her coat, she heard someone whispering to her. This has been a disaster, huh? It was Ripple. Up close, the scar on her face looked raw and painful. Nanako-san had assumed that was just part of her character design, but maybe it was actually a wound she'd received in real combat. So will the training be after this is over? Oh, thought Nanako-san. Data popped up in her goggles. Name, height, and weight. Then it slid down to a new page, listing career and place of birth, family structure, and the next page, and a number of pages after that. It arrived at the Today's Plan column. Now she understood why Ripple's name had sounded familiar when she first heard it. Originally, Nanako-san had come to this rural town to train a newbie. She'd arrived here along a series of special express trains after receiving an order to look into a certain magical girl's aptitude for working in an internal affairs job for the magical kingdom. Nanako-san put her hands together, apologizing for having forgotten too. I'm sorry, but we may not be able to do that right away. Even once the arrest is done, we'll have to deal with settling everything. I wonder how long that will be. I'm thinking the earlier the better, but right now I couldn't really say. But the city where I live isn't so far from here. Once things have calmed down, I'll come over right away. Ripple raised her eyebrows doubtfully. She was probably just trying to look doubtful, but in her case, even that look had quite a lot of punch. You don't live here? Huh? No, I don't. I mean, this is your region, isn't it, Ripple? No, it's not. Huh? They looked at each other. Nanako-san had been called out to her trainees' districts before. This was done when she had to do things like watch them work in their home region, or check up in town rumors to see if they had been exposed or not. That was less like training and more like observation. Conversely, trainees would come out to visit Nanako-san too, which was more common. That was done when she was teaching the basics to young magical girls who had not yet been assigned a region. Not once had she ever been summoned to an area that was not her trainee's responsibility. If there was some reason for this, it would certainly have been told to Nanako-san. As she tilted her head, wondering just what was going on here, she got a phone call. Her magical phone caller's ID indicated it was from her boss. Archfiend Palm, Hana, and Mana all left the room. Making an apologetic gesture with one hand, Nanako-san told Ripple to go on ahead and press the accept call button. This is Nanako-san. So it seems you've met the team. Without thinking, she stared at her phone. Had her boss been watching from somewhere? I wasn't watching. Your goggles are sending me information. Oh, yeah. When the goggles are removed, the signal terminates. So could you not leave them off again like you just did when you set them on the karaoke table? So she had been watching after all. Nanako-san gave her magical phone an uncomfortable look. There's no need for such tact. Even if your magic does not invade their privacy, that won't be a problem as long as the individual in question doesn't know. Okay. There is something else I'd like to inform you about. Before Nanako-san even called out, Hana Gekko-kujo was looking at her. It seemed her bunny ears were keen to her surroundings, even under her hood. Nanako-san raised an arm and called out to Mana and Hana, who had left the karaoke parlor and were about to head to the parking lot. Hana gave Mana a light poke, and before long, Mana broke out into a grimace. She had been staring at Nanako-san. Nanako-san didn't need to check the data in her goggles to recognize she was angry.
What are you dragging your heels for? What about the other two?
This time, Hana made no attempt to pacify Mana, who was still eyeing Nanako-san suspiciously. Nanako-san raised her palms defensively.
Ripple is back at the front desk, distracting Archfiend Palm for you. I need to talk to you about something. I have nothing to talk about. I am not an assassin or a killer. The creases in Mana's brow vanished. Her anger turned to surprise, and her mouth slightly agape and about to retort, froze in place. The Magical Girl Resources Department purely wants to be allowed to cooperate in the investigation. Moving in so close to Mana that she could feel her breath, Nanako-san lowered her voice to almost a whisper. My own abilities in combat are nothing more than average, since my job provided no opportunities to fight, but I have a discerning eye. And I don't just mean because I've been trained in a Magical Girl Resources. She flicked her goggles with her fingertip. This is my magic. Even when a magical girl is in human form, if I look at her through my goggles, it's clear to me at a glance what she is. Mana grabbed Nanako-san by her coat collar. Her expression wasn't irritated, but it was hard to call it amicable. She wasn't angry. She was threatening Nanako-san to learn what she could. Just what and how much do you know?
Your investigation team believes that Ripple and I are assassins sent in to finish off living witnesses, since we were dispatched from other departments. Am I wrong? Still clutching her collar, Mana fell silent. Her attitude was basically an affirmation. It appears a barrier has been erected around the town.
What about it? It's to prevent the criminals' escape.
An anti-magic barrier covering the whole of B City. A powerful blockade that prevents anyone with magical elements from getting in and out. Even in human form, a magical girl can't go through it. The same goes for mascots.
Yeah, that's right. We've been locked in. So what of it?
Mana apparently wanted to wait and see how Nanako-san would act. She licked her lips at the tip of her tongue. The slight gesture made Nanako-san flinch, but she plunged ahead. Their reaction was way too fast to have come off after being notified of your retreat. Putting up such a large-scale barrier requires careful preparation of both practitioners and catalysts. So in other words, you figured this barrier may have been prepared in advance, didn't you? Your specialized inspection team was driven off, and they even took into account your request for support. By forcibly creating the barrier they prepared in advance, the Department of Diplomacy has cut B City off from the outside. Nanako-san paused, wiping the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. The barrier was erected under the initiative of the Department of Diplomacy. They locked us in with the criminals. That wasn't done by Magical Girl Resources. Even we didn't know about the barrier, unlike the Department of Diplomacy, which sent in a weapon of mass destruction and then erected a barrier to lock us all in.
No, you are the same.
Mana shoved her aside, releasing her collar and causing Nanako-san to stagger.
You may seem to be in conflict now, but you're villains of the same stripe. You're all trying to use this incident as a political tool, but that's not how this is gonna go. I won't let that happen. This murderer will be dealt with as a murderer. I don't care if they're the dregs of society, pure evil, or just a maggot. That doesn't mean it's okay to make them your toy. One of mine died. Being forced into your games isn't worth it.
She spat, her gaze sharp. She wasn't so much glaring at Nanako-san, but she was glaring through her. Nanako-san sucked in a breath, filling her blood with oxygen.
I've looked into you guys,
Mana continued,
because I wanted to know what sort of people were butting in here and what their goals were. And I found out that Ripple over there was one of Cranberry's children. What's more, she's a survivor of the final exam where Cranberry died. The one they say was the most brutal.
What a laugh. Who would believe that? Ripple's job is to guard me. That's why she came here. I won't make her do anything beyond that. Besides, though she made it through Cranberry's exam, she just barely survived. You can tell from her eye and her arm, right? She's not as strong now as she was at her peak. The most she can do is protect one non-combatant magical girl. Nanako-san lowered the tone of her voice with one more notch. As you know, the magical girl the Department of Diplomacy sent us is Archfiend Palm. Nominally, she's here to support us, but she's capable of mass destruction. They call her the Department of Diplomacy's final weapon. That's clearly too much firepower just to help us with an arrest in this town. There's a good chance the Department of Diplomacy is trying to erase this criminal from existence. She bowed her head. If we cooperate, we may be able to arrest our culprit before they let Archfiend Palm off the leash. Neither of us wants the Department of Diplomacy doing as they please. And on that count, our goals are the same. We want you to use us. We won't get in your way. Please make use of our abilities. Head still bowed, Nanako-san went still. She could hear Mana and Hana discussing something in murmurs. She couldn't make out what they were saying, but she could take a guess. They were probably deciding whether to let her help or drive her away. Nanako-san heaved a deep sigh. She felt like her heart was ready to jump out of her mouth. Every single bit of it had been done under her boss's instruction. She could claim she didn't know anything about any of this, but Mana was unlikely to believe her. But it was the truth. Nanako-san had been following her boss's orders in real time to negotiate with Mana. Her instructions, down to the word she should say, had been displayed at her boss's discretion. She had received detailed directions for every gesture, like drop the tone of your voice here, or move in until you're a foot away from her. Nanako-san had desperately obeyed every one, heart pounding all the while. These were Nanako-san's goggles, but even she hadn't known what they could do that. Had this function been added in, she didn't want to think about how else they'd been tampered with. Digesting the conversation she just had, she couldn't stave off the feeling that something terrible was going on. She was getting closer and closer to the heart of this problem. At the very least, she wanted to get out alive. That's where I'm gonna finish off for today. I hope you've enjoyed the book so far. That was about a third of it. That was at page 66 I stopped at. Yeah. Let me switch to other screen. 1 second. Where's Justin? Oh, there. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So I'm gonna read the next third of the book in probably about 6 weeks from now. Yeah. Hope you're looking forward to that. I'll go over our stream schedule really quick, even though we haven't posted it yet. Oh, I'm glad you had fun. So our next stream is tomorrow night at 11 p.m. EST. Skitter, Scare, and Rubble are playing Sonic Adventure 2 missions. Skitter is gonna play Shadow missions. Scare is playing Tails missions, and Rubble is gonna do the kart racing emblems. Let me get it. And then Tuesday night at about 11 p.m. EST, Magma is going to do a watch party for Half-Life Alex with the Gnome is Too Aware. The finale was finally uploaded, so we're gonna watch the last couple parts on stream. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And Snuggle was gonna probably play some Animal Crossing after the watch party on Tuesday night. And then on Wednesday, around 5 p.m., Cuddle is going to read the next 10 chapters, or 10 issues? Do they call them chapters or issues? I don't of Archie Sonnet. I think we're on 60. Yeah. And then Thursday, Gravy is like really intensely sniffing the microphone. I don't know if that came through. Thursday, 3 p.m. Around 3 p.m. Magma is going to play Freedom Planet 2. As Carol's story. And Sunday, around 2 p.m. EST, Snuggles playing, I think we're gonna start having our Sunday streams at 3 p.m. and give us like a little more time to get around. We often end up not being able to stream at 2, like today. Sunday at 3 p.m. Snuggles playing Vivid Lope. Yeah. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day or night. I'm gonna raid. I think I'll raid Corteo, who's playing Corn Kid 64. And I think they just started their stream like a minute ago. Meow. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day or night. I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care of yourself. And Gravy, you want to say something?